All right, good morning and welcome. Excuse me. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Greg Evans, Florida Department of Transportation, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule for this webinar. It's been several weeks since we last met in person in Madison, and we've been through some very challenging times in our life with the COVID-19 virus. And before we get into our business today, I want to take just a minute to convey our continued concern for the health and safety of you personally, your families, your communities, our state, and our nation. If there's anything that we can do to assist you, please let me know. I also want to take a moment to thank our dedicated staff for the hard work that they have given to make this webinar possible, all the while working remotely as much as possible. And now I'll ask our facilitator, Greg Vaughn, who's going to have a very busy morning, to make a few announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we get started, I would like to just ask for your patience and understanding today as we adjust to this temporary meeting model. This is our first meeting via GoToWebinar, and we've tested the system multiple times. While we have confidence that everything will run smoothly, it is our first time doing this live. So please be patient and bear with us if there's any technical issues arise, and allow us to address them for you. We have also continued the technical work needed to gather, display, and analyze much of the data you have requested. In fact, I hope you will be pleased to see some of the additional data and graphics we are sharing today and providing in an online GIS tool for your review. We encourage you to complete the online modules, which virtually delivered the meeting materials for Task Force meeting number 5. You can access those modules with links provided in an email sent from Tori on the 17th of this month. As you may be aware, the governor and legislature has extended the deadline for the task force report until November 15th. We are confident that we will be able to complete the work by this new deadline. We have received many questions about when our next in-person meeting will actually take place, and at this point, we are abiding by the governor's executive order. Once the social distancing requirements have been amended, we will be in touch with you as soon as we have any specifics. We also intend to resume community open houses and other public input activities, such as presentations to county commissions and other groups, once larger in-person events can be scheduled. In the meantime, we continue to provide multiple opportunities for the public to receive information and provide input into the process, including the public comment period today, as well as the ability to provide comment via our website, email, or written mail. Our purpose in conducting this webinar today is to first catch you up on the technical work that has been occurring since we last met, and then to discuss the process through which you will be able to provide input over the next several weeks. Today, we want to focus on your input on two concepts: avoidance areas and attraction areas. For now, you can kind of think of the avoidance areas as the places with environmental, community, or economic resources where direct impacts from enhanced or new corridors should be avoided. And attraction areas are places where a connection to or service by an enhanced or new corridor is desired to accomplish economic, community, environmental, or other goals, such as areas targeted in local plans for economic development. Together, they will help to provide a holistic view of the study area. We will show you the data that we have collected so far on both topics and the tool used to map this data. We will also discuss how you can provide your input to help make sure we are looking at the data needed for you to make informed decisions moving forward. This data and your input are a critical foundation for our work moving forward when we reconvene at Task Force Meeting 6. We will use this information to refine our discussion about needs and guiding principles. Public comment period begins at 10:30 a.m. or as soon as the agenda items are completed. Requests to comment that were received by 5 p.m. yesterday will be addressed during the public comment period in the order they were received. If you're a member of the public who is going to be asking to speak today, when your name is called, we will unmute your line in order for you to provide comment within your allotted time of 3 minutes. Only one person at a time will be unmuted. And if you have self-muted, please be sure to unmute before speaking. If you did not submit your request in time to be able to speak today, please feel free to email your comments to fdot.listens@dot.state.fl.us. The webinar is being recorded and will be available with other materials on the MCOR's website. Task force members, you will remain muted for the entirety of the presentation. We will unmute task force members one at a time during the question and answer period. Again, only one person at a time will be unmuted. If you have self-muted, please be sure to unmute before speaking. For the question and answer period, we will unmute all task force members one at a time for a single round. Then we may have time for additional questions that you may have. Please do not put the webinar on hold or take another call during the webinar, as we will hear your hold music. One last note, we may have adjusted your username in order to readily identify you as a task force member in order to unmute your line. Please do not make any changes to the username so that you may be heard during roll call and the Q&A period. The objectives for today are shown on this slide. They are to receive updates on task force activities. I've provided some of this already, and you'll hear more throughout. To receive briefing on process for identifying avoidance and attraction areas as input to task force recommendations. Also to describe the homework process for receiving task force member input at the next in-person meeting, and then finally to receive public comments. This slide shows the agenda items and the times that we have for everything. The presentation will begin here in just a few minutes at 9:45, with next steps following at 10:10. That'll be followed up by task force member questions at 10:15, and then the public comment period is scheduled to begin at 10:30, or as soon as the agenda items are completed. We do have several folks who would like to speak today, and so we'll have more instructions as we get to that time. But during the public comment period, we hope that all task force members will be able to stay on the line for that public comment period. Today we have a short reminder of the government and sunshine requirements. Generally speaking, task force members should not communicate either verbally, email, or via third party to another task force member on items under consideration by the task force. However, you may communicate on matters unrelated to task force topics. David Flynn from the Office of the Attorney General is on the webinar today as well, and can answer any questions regarding the Sunshine Law as it relates to the task force when we get to the question and answer part of the agenda. All task force members were given unique links to sign in. As task force members logged in this morning, we noted attendance. I'll now read through your names and organizations and note who is present and who is not in attendance today. If you are a substitute and we didn't recognize your attendance, or if you came in after we were able to log the attendance, please send an email to Ryan Asmus at ryan.asmus@dot.state.fl.us. So now I'll go through and quick roll call and just comment based on the attendance who we have in attendance today and who's not able to be present. Chairman Greg Evans, from representing the Florida Department of Transportation, is present. Jason Peters, representing the Florida Department of Transportation, is present. Chris Wynn, representing the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, is present. Mark Futrell, representing the Florida Public Service Commission, is present. Tim Vanderhoof, representing Enterprise, Florida, is not present today. Commissioner Jeff Kennard, representing the Hernando Citrus Metropolitan Planning Organization, is not present today, not be able to be with us. Scott Coons, representing the North Central Florida Regional Planning Council, is present. Charles Lee, representing Audubon, Florida, is present. Kent Wimmer, representing Defenders of Wildlife, is present. Commissioner Scott Carnahan, representing the Citrus County Commission, is present. Commissioner Anthony Adams, representing Lafayette County, is not present today. Diane Head, representing Career Source Florida, is present. Paul Myers, representing the Florida Department of Health, is present and on the line today. Commissioner Mark Hatch, representing the Dixie County Commission, is not present. Janet Bowman, representing the Nature Conservancy, is present today. Commissioner Pam Fiegel, representing Taylor County Commission, is present. Chris Lee, representing the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, is also present today. Lyle Sigler, representing the Northwest Florida Water Management District, is present on the line. Brian Kaufman, representing Madison County, is not present with us today. Michelle Hopkins, representing the Southwest Florida Water Management District, is on the webinar today and present. Commissioner Ronald Kitchen, representing the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, is present. Christopher Emanuel, representing the Florida Chamber of Commerce, is not present today. Commissioner Todd Gray, representing the Gilchrist County Commission, is present today and on the line. Ken Armstrong, representing the Florida Trucking Association, is present. Mary Cross, representing the Florida Department of Education, is also present. Randy Wilkerson, representing the Florida Rural Water Association, is present. Chris Bailey, representing the Florida Internet and Television Association, is present. Commissioner Kristen Dozier, from representing the Capital Region Transportation Planning Agency, is present and on the line today. Commissioner Matt Brooks, representing the Levy County Commission, is in attendance today on the webinar. Susan Ramsey, representing the Florida Economic Development Council, is present today. Charles Shin, representing the Florida Farm Bureau Federation, is present today. Chris Stahl, representing the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, is also present today. Dr. Lawrence Barrett from the Florida Gateway College is also present today. Substituting for Brian McManus is James Stansberry, representing the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, and he's present today on the call. John Groskoff, representing the North Florida Community College, is also present today on the webinar. Chris Rito, representing the Appalachia Regional Planning Council, is not present today. Thomas Hawkins, representing 1,000 Friends of Florida, is on the webinar today and present. Commissioner Betsy Barfield, representing Jefferson County Commission, is present. Ashley Stefanik, representing Swanee River Water Management District, is present. Pegram Hanrahan, representing the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, is not present today. She was not able to be with us. And last but not least, Audrey Kidwell, representing Volunteer Florida, is present today on the webinar. All right, Mr. Chairman, now that all the formalities are completed, I'll hand it back. Well, actually, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan Asmus, the FDOT production lead, who will take us through today's presentation.
Thank you, Greg, and good morning, everyone. Today's webinar is focused on the process for identifying avoidance and attraction areas as input to task force member recommendations. This briefing includes 4 key items: an update on the avoidance areas that were identified in prior task force meetings, an introduction to attraction areas. We will also explain the purpose of introducing them to you at this point in the process, a tutorial on our online GIS tool and its new features. Use of this tool is a key component of the last topic, which is the homework process for preparation for the next in-person meeting. As you read in the email from Tori Alston, the homework process will follow the webinar. We will discuss the details of that process and next steps as we prepare for Task Force Meeting number 6. Here is how we define avoidance areas. They are geographic areas with environmental, community, or other resources where direct impacts from enhanced or new corridors should be avoided. Here are the avoidance areas which were introduced in Task Force Meeting number 4. FDOT has already committed to the areas that you see. And as a reminder, will not impact are areas which there should be no new impact from transportation corridor, and no new corridor through are areas with an existing transportation corridor where no new corridor should be considered, but existing facilities or right-of-ways could be enhanced. Your input continues to be very important to us, and we'd like to thank you for suggesting additional avoidance areas to be included in this process. On this slide, you will see the online GIS tool that was introduced in March. At Task Force Meeting number 4, you identified 17 additional avoidance areas that you would like to be able to view and categorize. All 17 have been included in the GIS tool and are listed on the left of this slide. Now let's show how these various layers come together. In the computer-based training for task force members, avoidance areas were discussed and comments collected. Also, a new layer was introduced, existing roads for potential co-location. One example of a new avoidance area added at your request is spring priority focus areas. We have highlighted these here in blue so that you can see how it overlays with the original avoidance layers in magenta and pink. To provide you with a holistic view of the study area, we are introducing a new concept for task force consideration, attraction areas. These are also available to be seen on the GIS tool. Attraction areas are places where a connection to or service by an enhanced or new corridor is desired to accomplish economic, community, environmental, or other goals, such as areas targeted in local plans for economic development. Attraction areas included in the tool are listed here. Many of these features may be familiar. In earlier meetings, they were presented to you on boards and placed around the room in the document folder in your packet. You will not be asked to categorize these areas, but they are available so that you can see how and where attraction features are located relative to avoidance areas. You will need to categorize as you complete the homework process following today's webinar. As we go through the tutorial for the online GIS tool, we will highlight how these layers might be helpful to you while going through the homework process. As always, your input is important to us. There may be additional attraction areas that you feel should be identified, and we will discuss how to provide your thoughts on additional attraction areas when we review the process with the homework. Now let's move on to the tutorial to show you how you can view the avoidance and attraction layers in the GIS tool. Today we will run through an example of how to use the tool. The first step is to access the tool using the web address or the link that you see here. We will begin by reviewing how to access the layers within the tool. The default setting in the tool will bring up the study area, the counties, existing corridors in red, and the avoidance areas that have already been committed to by FDOT, seen in pink and magenta. To the bottom, you will see the 4 icons that represent layer list. Attraction layers, committed FDOT areas, will not impact and no new corridor through layers, and task force number 4 comments, which are avoidance areas you requested at meeting number 4. For the first step, click one of the icons to view the specific layers. We're going to begin by selecting the third category, task force number 4 comments. You will see the list of the 17 added avoidance layers that you requested. We have selected to view the spring priority focus areas, which you can see in blue on the map. This provides the opportunity to not only see the locations of the spring priority focus areas, but also how they overlap and interact with other layers. Next, we'll select an attraction area. After clicking on the attraction layer list, you will see a second table of layers on the map. For this example, we have decided to select the attraction area opportunity zone. You can see the opportunity zones as the green areas displayed on the map. These are zones identified by the U.S. Treasury where new investment is incentivized, focusing on low-income neighborhoods. You can see in the circle how the opportunity zones within proximity of some of the spring priority focus areas. Although you're not asked to categorize the attraction areas, having a holistic view of how these attraction areas and avoidance areas interact may have an impact on how you decide to categorize an avoidance area. Some attraction areas, such as opportunity zones, colleges, and universities, are reflected as regional areas or specific data points on the map. Others are reflected as heat maps. Let's review the homework process. There are 5 steps. Step 1 is to use the online GIS tool to review the avoidance and attraction areas identified to date. Step 2 is to review the avoidance areas. Step 3 is to review and prioritize the attraction areas. Step 4 is to participate in an individual technical briefing with the production team to review and answer your questions on the data, tools, and process. And then step 5 is to categorize the avoidance areas and offer any additional attraction areas. As a reminder, to access the online GIS tool, you will click on the link which you saw earlier in the presentation. Please take time to familiarize yourself with the tool. Be sure to review the avoidance areas and familiarize yourself with how they are reflected in the tool. Remember, there are 2 groups of avoidance areas: those that have already been committed to by FDOT, and those that you requested at meeting number 4. The attraction areas that have been added to the tool are shown here again. These areas are based on data presented by FDOT or suggestions by task force members at prior meetings. If there are other attraction areas that you believe would be helpful to identify, you will have the opportunity to propose those at task force meeting number 6. The tools help assist with reviewing and prioritizing the attraction areas that are most important to you and your community or organization. Production staff or facilitator will be in touch with you soon to set up technical briefings at your convenience during the next few weeks. Given the current need to continue to social distancing, we anticipate the briefings will be conducted via GoToMeetings or other virtual platforms. So we would suggest that you schedule them at a time when you can be in front of your computer. The briefing will review the online GIS tool and the data which has been collected, as well as address any questions that you may have. One key step in the homework process is to understand the 4 categories that you see here and how to consider how to consider how you might apply them to additional avoidance areas requested by you at meeting number 4. You will be able to share your thoughts with fellow task force members at meeting number 6. The work that you are doing is critical to refining draft needs and guiding principles and developing consensus for your ultimate deliverable, the task force report. Your input will guide FDOT in later phases for identifying paths and courses, as well as implementation strategies. Let's show how this works. In past meetings, you have been providing input to drafts of both needs and guiding principles. We want to show examples of how these directly relate to the data and one another, and how these can instruct the project development and implementation. Let's look at an example. Remember the avoidance area spring priority focus areas, which we have viewed before? This area contributed to identifying the first draft need shown on this slide: protection of spring priority focus areas. Based on this need, a draft guiding principle was developed. Prioritize avoidance to lands and waters of outstanding Florida springs. Where avoidance is not feasible, minimize and mitigate impacts. That principle will instruct the project development and implementation. One example shown here would mean that the ultimate alignment avoids existing spring priority focus areas to maximize to the maximum extent possible, while also leveraging the ability to mitigate negative impacts where possible. Let's look at a second example. The tool shows a few layers depicting locations of existing employers, opportunity zones, and potential employer and investment opportunities. All these attraction areas contributed to identifying the second need shown on this slide: job creation, particularly in areas with high unemployment. Based on this need, a draft guiding principle was developed. Support local and regional economic development and land use plans. As one example, this principle could lead to an alignment in access points such as interchange or frontage road, connecting the corridor to a regional roadway network with compatible land uses. As we continue through the remaining meetings, we will continue to work with you to ensure that we are connecting the dots to indicate the importance of the work that you all are doing. In conclusion of this portion of the webinar, we look forward to the opportunity to work with you all on the technical briefings and answering any questions that you may have. Now I would like to turn it back over to our chair, Secretary Evans, to go over the next steps. Thank you.
All right, great job, Ryan. Tell you, you done a good job there, and thank you for that. A lot of effort went into that presentation. I do want to take just a few minutes and recap some next steps before we open up the Q&A for the task force. Today's presentation, the webinar recording, the GIS link, all will be posted on the MCOR's website for task force and public to have access to. And again, we are in very challenging times, and many of you are dealing with unusual schedules, maybe unusual work environments, and I know urgent demands on your time. So please know that we are ready to adapt to your schedule, support you in any way we can. And during this time, to effectively stay engaged in the task force process, we will continue to explore and utilize virtual means of engagement until social distancing restrictions are loosened and allow us to meet again in person. Our goal is to resume face-to-face meetings in June or as soon as social distancing guidance permits us to convene. We will be looking forward to further our conversation on the homework process and finalize needs and guiding principles in the future task force meetings. So now that we've let Greg Bond catch his breath and get a drink of water, he'll open up and go round table for the questions for the task force.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, now we'd like to open it up For questions from the task force members, before we begin our public comment period, I would like to state that in addition to Secretary Evans, David Flynn from the Office of Attorney General, Ryan, and myself, we have the following FDOT representatives on the webinar to answer your questions during this time. Will Watts, FDOT Chief Engineer. Also, Wei Shin, FDOT Chief Planner. So with that being said, what we'll do is we'll start. I'm going to call out, we'll just kind of stack everyone up as we go through just to see if you have any questions regarding the materials that were presented today. And so we'll start with Mr. Chairman. I'll start with you, and then I'll go to Jason Peters and Chris Wynn if y'all would be on deck, and then we'll just kind of go through and I'll touch base with each of you to see if they have any questions. We will unmute the task force members one at a time to ask questions. If you have self-muted, please be sure to unmute before speaking. Again, the question and answers period will be related to the content from today's webinar. So with that, I'll start out with the chair and ask Mr. Chairman if he has any questions regarding the assignment.
All right, thank you, Greg. No real questions, but I do want to personally thank each task force member that allowed us into their schedule today. We're in a different world for quite a while, and maybe forever. But I do want to take that opportunity to personally thank each one of the task force members for joining us today. I want to say thank you to the small army of DOT and our support staff that took to make this happen. This is something new for us. Technology has got us to this point where we can do this, and we're glad to have such talented individuals that made today possible. So thanks to everyone. Thank you, Greg.
All right.
Unmuted.
All right. Let's see here. So Jason Peters, and then followed by Chris Wynn. So give us just a second here. There we go. So Jason, it looks like you're self-muted. Do you have any questions?
Greg, no questions, but I do want to echo what Secretary Evans said. I appreciate everyone's willingness to take time out of their busy schedule to be part of this initiative and this effort. And as Secretary Evans said, really appreciate the team, Greg, your folks, and also Secretary Evans's team at District 2. Like I said, technology is a really great thing, but it can also be a bad thing sometimes. But you guys have done a really good job in presenting this material and organizing this in a very good manner, considering the times we're in at this point. But just want to say appreciate the team and the task force members for their time.
Very good. Well, thank you for your comments. Chris Wynn. Chris, do you have any questions regarding the presentation today?
Yes, good morning. This is Chris. I just want to start off by saying, Mr. Chairman, good job, and Ryan and the whole team. I echo all those comments. I've already started combing through the GIS model that I found the link to on that e-learning curve website that we completed our modules for the virtual meeting 5. It's a very powerful tool. You all have done a great job assembling many data sets. I just wanted my main question or thought leading into these one-on-one meetings would be on one particular data set in the avoidance category. From our perspective, the CLIP, C-L-I-P data set, I haven't seen that anywhere in the online GIS tool. That stands for Critical Lands and Waters Identification Project, and that's just it's a powerful model that has a collection of many data sets that identify statewide priorities, and our agency gives a high priority to this model and uses it quite a bit in future land use planning. So I just want to, kind of call out and see if we can get that added And if not, definitely focus on that data set in our one-on-one meetings. Thank you.
Hey Chris, Will Watts here, and Wei, we can certainly accommodate any layer you guys want to add to either the avoidance or the attraction layers. That's what the tool's for, so we can be nimble as we need to be to add more information.
And Chris, this is Wei. Our ETDM database has a lot of the information that's in the CLIP database, so we'll be working with you to make sure we get the latest.
All right, so then we'll now go to, got Mark Futrell, followed by Scott Coons. So Mark, do you have any questions in regarding to the presentation today?
Good morning. I have no questions. Thank you.
All right, very good. Scott Coons. Scott, do you have any questions in regards to the items today? Give us just a second. Let us find you on here. There we go. It looks like you may be self-muted. There you go. There you are. Any questions, Scott?
Yes, I do. Just one. Concerning the new GIS tool and the new layers for avoidance. I didn't see included the natural resources of regional significance that is part of the strategic regional policy plans of each of the regional planning councils that cover the study area. So if we could include the natural resources of regional significance from those regional planning councils, strategic regional policy plans to evaluate as avoidance areas.
Certainly, Will Watts again, we can certainly add those to the task force comments on that grouping. Sure.
All right, very good. Thank you, Scott. All right, we're going to have Charles Lee followed by Kent Wimmer. Charles, any questions in regards to the presentation today?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I have 2 points, 2 questions. The first is that since we last met, there have been 2 actions in Levy County, 2 resolutions passed and sent to the Department of Transportation. The first one dealt with a county stated request that there be no penetration of the Goethe State Forest with any corridor, even a co-located corridor. And then a couple of weeks later, I believe on the 7th of this month, the commission passed a resolution in which it indicated that the county's position within Levy County was for the no-build alternative. Now, I'll note that earlier, Marion County in the Turnpike, Northern Turnpike Extension Task Force's realm, Marion County had requested the addition of its farmland preservation area, and that area popped up in bright pink on the avoidance maps, as obviously we think it should have. And so my first question is, what is DOT's planned response in terms of amending the avoidance maps to reflect the 2 related positions that were taken by resolution of the Levy County Commission?
Hey Charles, Will Watts, thanks for the questions. Those are definitely good questions. So Goethe State Forest is certainly a high priority area for the department, and I believe it's no new corridors through right now as far as the department's commitment. Now the task force can amend whatever they wish to strengthen that statement, strengthen that position with guiding principles. And that's kind of the purpose of this exercise of reviewing the avoidance areas and categorizing them in those 4 categories, right? Which is complete avoidance, no new corridors through, impact only if you enhance, and then our normal minimize and mitigate type process. So certainly this forum can strengthen that position and provide consensus on strengthening that position with Goethe State Forest. So it is a valuable resource, and we certainly want to avoid at all costs. The second part of that is the resolution that was passed earlier in the month. And we appreciate the input that Levy County had, and we certainly encourage them to reach out to us earlier when they have positions so we can work with them. No build option is always an option when we go into PD&E. So we appreciate that position, and we have that as an option.
All right, Charles, thanks for your question. We're going to go to Kent Wimmer, and then we're actually going to kick back up. We had Commissioner Jeff Kennard join in, and so we'll go to him next after Kent. Kent, do you have any questions in regards to today's presentation?
Good morning. This is Kent. I agree with Chris that we definitely need to include CLIP. And actually, I've had an opportunity to go through a lot of the maps. I actually serve on both the two northern task forces, and I look forward to working with both staff, hopefully at the same time, to go over the maps. I have a lot of comments, and one thing I will note, I was surprised how different the maps and the data sets are for the two task forces when they have two counties that overlap. So anyway, I have quite a long list of things to talk about with staff.
And Kent, that's what those sessions are for, and we'll try to maximize your time with the members we sent out to you. So it may be virtual until we get back to meeting face to face. So.
All right, thanks, Kent. All right, so like I said, we're going to go back to Commissioner Jeff Kennard, Citrus County Commissioner representing Hernando Citrus MPO, was able to join us after we took the initial roll. So Commissioner Kennard, did you have any questions in regards to the presentation today?
No, sir, not at all. I just raised my hand here virtually when I heard the roll call and was recorded as not present again. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew I was here listening in and paying attention to what's going on.
Very good. Yeah, we apologize about that. When we're trying to show this, there's the list of attendees is kind of bouncing around at the very beginning of the meeting, so it's kind of hard to kind of make sure we had everybody. But I do appreciate you letting us know that. So very good. We're going to go now to Commissioner Citrus County Commissioner Scott Carnahan, and then followed by Diane Head from Career Source Florida. So Commissioner Carnahan, do you have any questions?
No, sir, I don't. I just want to say thank you for having this today, and appreciate listening to everybody. But I do not have any questions.
All right, very good. Thank you. Diane Head, we'll come to you next, followed by Paul Myers from Department of Health. So Diane, do you have any questions?
I do not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Paul Myers from Department of Health, any questions?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I have a question, and perhaps I missed it on the GIS layer. For that, I apologize. Were we able to locate the special needs shelters and the general population shelters for hurricane evacuations on those layers?
Hey, Ryan, did we get those added? Just curious.
Yeah, yes, sir, we did.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Paul. Okay, we're now going to go to Janet Bowman, followed by Commissioner Pam Fiegel. So Janet, let's give us just a second here to use the technology to get you set up. Okay, Janet, do you have any questions?
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Janet Bellman with the Nature Conservancy. I'm very glad to see the Springs focal areas added. I really appreciate that. And, you know, I would just add that the CLIP layers also include some significant water resource features. So that's another reason to spend some time with CLIP. But again, I really appreciate the enhanced data on Springs. Thanks.
All right, very good. Thank you for that. Commissioner Fiegel from Taylor County, do you have any questions?
I don't have any this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, now we're going to go to Chris Lee with Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, followed by Lyle Sigler from the Northwest Florida Water Management District. Chris Lee, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. All right, Lyle Sigler. Lyle, do you have any questions? Okay, hearing none, we will, Lyle, if you do have a question or something, you can use the raise your hand feature and let us know. Michelle Hopkins, we'll come to you next. Michelle, do you have any questions?
Good morning. No, I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let me get a couple of people on deck just so you can be ready. We're going to go to Citrus County Commissioner Ronald Kitchen, followed by Christopher Emanuel, and then Commissioner Todd Gray. Like I said, we'll go back to Commissioner Ronald Kitchen. Do you have any questions, sir?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. Christopher Emanuel from the Florida Chamber. Any questions, sir? Hold on just a second. We apologize. Technology has already been stated is good and also can be difficult at times. So give me just a second. All right, we'll come back. We'll come back to him just to verify. Commissioner Todd Gray from Gilchrist County, do you have any questions, sir?
Layers. The Wakasasa Flats is a fairly significant area of concern in Gilchrist County. It runs from north to south. I think it evenly it ends up down into Levy County, but with looking at the corridors and the maps today and the layers, it would, we have an area east of that would fall outside of the flatwoods, but I think that should be identified on that map.
Commissioner, we were unmuting you. It took a second. You'd already started because I told you to go ahead and start, but I didn't realize that we didn't have you unmuted. So when you kicked in, it was basically you were talking about the Wakasasa Flats. Was there a specific data set or data layer that you were referring to, or was it just primarily that resource?
Yeah, that resource, I didn't see it on a specific layer, and maybe I missed it, but and again, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Thank you for that tool is powerful, and it's been very useful for me to go in and click the different layers and see what happens and what shows up. But I didn't see that specific feature shown on any map. So I thought, knowing that, again, whatever options selected and where this road may eventually go one day, I think that feature is significant enough. We need to have that shown as something we need to avoid. If you could do that on one of your layers.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. All right. The next three, just to put it out there, is Ken Armstrong from the Florida Trucking Association, followed by Mary Cross with the Department of Education, and Randy Wilkerson from the Florida Rural Water Association. Ken, do you have any questions today?
Well, I continue to be confused, I guess. In the module that we reviewed, it had to do with high-level needs, and during the AMLE discussion on the module and a little bit today, it seems to me that we are ignoring the two big issues here that that the primary reason we even have this task force is because the state of Florida has deemed that it's important to have sort of population relief valves and transportation relief valves, while at the same time obviously doing the various other multi-use opportunities to with communities along this particular route. And am I just supposed to assume by this point that those items are givens, and so we don't need to refer to them anywhere in any of our writings or guiding principles or implementation strategies or high-level needs? Or do I need to sort of keep at every meeting saying, let's all remember the reason we're here? I don't know how to continue or not continue with that question.
Hey, Ken, this is Will. Appreciate those thoughts and reminding everybody the charge of the task force. We're certainly open to expanding the needs discussion. So when your technical group gets with you, get the language that we think we need to move forward with, and then we can further refine those emphasis points as we refine the guiding principles. So no, don't give up. Keep pushing what's important to you and what's important to the bill with the discussions. Thank you, Ken.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Mary Cross from the Department of Education. Mary, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Randy Wilkerson, followed by Chris Bailey and Commissioner Kristen Dozier. But Randy Wilkerson with the Florida Rural Water Association. Any questions? Okay. Randy, if you do have a question or whatever, you can shoot an email and we can get back to you in regards to that. Chris Bailey, Florida Internet and Television Association. Any questions?
Hi, good morning. Yes, regarding the GIS map and particularly looking at the broadband providers, could you tell me what source or sources were used to populate that heat map?
Ryan, do we have that available, or do we need to get back?
Let us get back to you on that, please.
Okay, I appreciate it. Also, as I'm looking at the map now, I'm going through trying to select that, and it's not really populating anything. So I don't know if that's just not functional at this point or not. So we'll just follow up on that, and I can help provide some sources if you do not have any of those.
That's great. Appreciate that.
Thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Commissioner Kristen Dozier, do you have any questions today?
Work.
Can you? I'm sorry. Can you start over? There was an issue with the audio.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I do not have any questions today. Thank you for the hard work.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Now we're going to go to Commissioner Matt Brooks, representing Levy County. Commissioner Brooks, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions on the presentation today. The one thing I did want to ask was, as I was going through the learning curve, and if you guys have already talked about this, I apologize, but the public engagement comments section I was not able to open. Is that going to be a feature that's enabled, or when I open it, it just says download not available?
We're getting that corrected, Commissioner. We'll probably have it corrected by the end of the day.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Brooks. All right, we have Susan Ramsey, followed by Charles Shin and Chris Stahl. So Susan Ramsey from the representing Florida Economic Development Council. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Greg. I do not have any questions, but I would just like to say thank you to you and the DOT staff who have worked hard to adapt and adjust through these changes. And I've, talked to you, reached out to you before, and everything's good. I'll let you know if I have any questions going forward. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Charles Shin from Florida Farm Bureau Federation. Any questions? Hold on. Yeah, hold on a second. If you're talking, just give us just a second. All right, there you go.
There we go. I see. Thank you very much for the work in putting together today's meeting. Also, I do want to say thanks for the GPS online tool. That's really helpful. Don't have any questions on today's meeting, but I do have a comment on some of the features on the online tool. Florida Ag has shown how critical it is to the nation's food supply, especially during this pandemic. And that's, I mean, it's always been important, but it's really popped up. But with that in mind, I'm looking at the prime farmland feature, and that's been added. We do appreciate that very much. But I don't see a definition or a source for that data set, and it's interesting because you click on that data set and you have to really zoom into the counties to even see anything going on, and yet you understand and see how widespread agriculture is across these counties. You look at the 26 future land use maps, the physical maps that you all gave us in the last meeting, and it shows an extensive coverage of ag across these counties, and yet this particular data set seems to be very limited. And so I do have a comment about that. I just don't know what's going on with that.
Okay, when we get with you with our technical groups, let's work through those details and see how we can expand the data where it's more useful. We're certainly open to any suggestions.
Okay, thanks, Charles. All right, so Chris Stahl is coming up next, followed by Dr. Lawrence Barrett, and then James Stansberry. So Chris Stahl from Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Do you have any questions today?
No, I don't really have a question. Just a request that you guys could like leave me to the end of when you start making calls to discuss this stuff, because the department has a lot of resources up and down all three of these corridors. And so I've got people looking at all of how you guys have categorized the different resources of the state, the state parks, the greenways and the trails and everything else. And so we want to give you the best meaningful feedback that we possibly can. So kind of push me back towards the end. I won't mind one bit.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Dr. Lawrence Barrett, do you have any questions today? Okay, Dr. Barrett, it looks like we're having some audio problems. We'll get with you on the one-on-ones and try to address any questions that you may have. James Stansberry, any questions today?
No, sir, I do not have any questions. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right. John Grosskopf from North Florida Community College. Any questions today? It looks like you may be self-mute. There you go.
No questions today, sir.
Very good. Thank you. So we got Thomas Hawkins, followed by Commissioner Betsy Barfield from Jefferson County, and then Ashley Stefanik from Swanee River Water Management District. Thomas Hawkins, Thousand Friends of Florida. Any questions today?
I have one comment and two questions. The comment is just that I really appreciate FDOT staff. You guys have taken a really difficult situation, and I think organized a process that does public involvement and participation in the task force about as great as you can. And it's consistent with all the good work you've done throughout this process. So I wanted to echo those comments that Greg stated at the beginning and give my personal thanks as well. The second comment was I've played a little bit with the online tool, and I just want to make sure I'm 100% clear on how you intend for us to do our ranking. You want us to order the layers in terms of priority, or you just want us to orally transmit that to staff when we meet in our one-on-one meetings?
Hey, Thomas, Will Watts. So great question for clarification. So we kind of got, we use the term homework, but it's more of an opportunity to make sure everybody's informed and can make some good opinions on the two different kind of assignments. So the avoidance areas, we're looking for some input on what you want to completely avoid, no new corridors through. If we do impact, require enhancement, and then the minimize, mitigate. So those four options. And so we're not looking for anything to hand in back to us, but certainly during the one-on-ones, we want to get a feel for what your priorities are with that grouping on the avoidance. And the attraction is just is a different way of doing something similar, but just prioritizing what's important on the attraction side. Again, not turning a homework assignment back into us per se, but when we do have the opportunity to get back face to face, maybe in June, that we can have a robust and well-informed discussion on how to use that information to build the guiding principles. So it's kind of it's just an exercise while we can work remotely and then get better prepared for the next face-to-face.
Great, that's super helpful, Will, and that's good. I'm in school mode and thinking about homework, so I definitely misunderstood that. But that's a good clarification.
And yeah, and we struggled on what to call it because it really is it is homework, but we don't have to turn in an assignment, right? So it's just to get everybody educated because it's a lot of data, it's a lot of information.
And then my third and final point is also a question, and that is I've seen a lot of great changes with the draft guiding principles and how some of the ideas have been reorganized into potential implementation strategies. But I have some very specific comments on how we can continue to improve those, and in particular, how we can make them reflect the emphasis the legislature gave to multiple transportation modes and to conservation. And what is the best avenue for me to share that? Should I do that in my one-on-one? Should I reduce comments to writing and share them with the task force and staff? Kind of what would be most useful and would help me most see those changes in our next revision of those of that language?
So certainly gear up for our next face-to-face, but we're open to receiving information during our one-on-ones, but it really gear up for the face-to-face. Weiwei's got a few comments she'd like to share too.
Yeah, Thomas, thank you for your comments about the guiding principles. We're hoping that when we resume face-to-face meetings, we're going to focus most of the task force deliberation time on helping developing these guiding principles. I'll give you a call and then we'll work out a way for you to help us develop those. It'll be probably a one-on-one, you and I and the teams can get together and make sure we address your specific comments.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And again, I know I said it, but would want to reiterate how much I recognize you guys are doing a great job in tough circumstances, and that I appreciate the way you're approaching this.
Thanks, Thomas.
All right, thank you, Thomas. Commissioner Betsy Barfield from Jefferson County, do you have any questions today?
I do not, and thank you for all the hard work to the DOT staff and everybody else that's worked on this project. It's pretty amazing.
Thank you, ma'am, for those kind of comments. Ashley Stefanik with the Swanee River Water Management District. Any questions?
I do have a question. I've been looking at the GIS tool, and thank you for putting that together and out there for us. It's a great tool, easy to use, lots of layers. I've skimmed through the layers so far, and I don't see the FEMA floodway layer. I do see the FEMA floodplain layer. However, the floodway is a separate area and has more restrictions, and so I'd like to have that added if possible.
Ashley, good to hear from you. Yep, we can get that added.
Thank you.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Ashley. Keegan Hanrahan, I think I saw you earlier. You'd popped on. It looked like now it doesn't look like maybe you're there. So we will go down to Audrey Kidwell from Volunteer, Florida. Give us just a second here. All right, Audrey, any questions today?
Good morning. This is Audrey. I do not have any further questions. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to go back. That was so that completed our list. I would like to go back real quick and see if we can do touch base with. I thought that maybe Commissioner Mark Hatch from Dixie County had joined us. Commissioner Hatch, are you there? Do you have any questions? Commissioner Hatch, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we ain't got no question.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Okay. Although we've touched base with each of the task force members, there may have been a question that you thought of after I came to you before, and so I'd like to open it up one more time, real quick, before we get to the next steps and public comment. We're going to use the raise your hand feature to accomplish this. So also remember that project staff will be reaching out to you for the one-on-one technical briefings, and questions can be addressed there as well. So this is not your only opportunity. So if it's something in detail, that would be a great opportunity to be able to do that. But if any of the task force members have any questions that they would like to ask now, if you would, please use click the raise your hand button on the GoToMeeting window, and we will call on you. I know that Pegan, there you are, Pegan Hanrahan, representing the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. It shows that you're self-muted. So if you could unmute yourself and let us know if you have any questions. There you are. Pegan, can you hear us? Okay, having some issues there in regards to that. I do believe that Charles Lee, I think I remember seeing your hand raised. So give me just a second. Okay,
Yes.
Charles.
Yes.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
we can.
One additional question, and that is, first of all, I'd like to again congratulate the staff of DOT for the GIS tool. It is really good. There's one thought that I have, and that is in preparing to give input in the one-on-one sessions, is there any possible feature that could be plugged into the GIS tool that would allow those of us using it to mark and measure on the GIS maps, and then be able to use those maps to sort of quantify and focus our points for discussion in the 101. Typically in GIS formats, there's a way that you can draw a line or draw a circle and mark that on the map and then save that in a file. And I'm wondering, is there any possibility of that feature may be in the system already, may just not be revealed? And I'm wondering, is there any way that could be opened up if it's there, or added if it's not there?
Charles, great idea, and great to push us that way. So let's see what we can do. The team will work on that and see what we can come up with. I'm sure, just like you said, GIS is it's a geo-featured tool. So let's just see how easy it is to get it on the website presence. But let's circle back with you. Great idea.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Kent Wimmer, I see your hand is raised. So Kent, another question?
Yes, I was curious when staff might be reaching out to us to set up these meetings.
I believe I believe that the staff, the production team, will be reaching out over the next couple of days. We wanted to give time to be able to get this in your hands, and but yes, so it will be occurring over the next, I would probably say within the next week.
All right. And the 4 categories that Will and Ryan talked about, or 4 or 5 categories, I didn't take a screenshot when those flashed by. Did you? Are those available someplace?
Yeah, we'll post or it is posted. The presentation from today is posted, but it's the same 2 categories we talked about from the department that committed, which is complete avoidance, no new corridors through, are the first 2 that we need your input. And then if we do impact, which is category 3, we need to enhance and what that looks like. And then the 4th category is kind of more of our normal course of business, where we minimize and mitigate as necessary. So it is a prioritization, right? Obviously, avoidance is a higher priority than the 4th on the list.
All right. It looks like that Commissioner Matt Brooks, you have your hand raised. You have another question?
Yeah, I did. I had a question in regards to Mr. Lee had mentioned the resolutions, 2 different resolutions that our county had passed, but I'm also getting feedback from municipalities. I have a letter from the city of Chiefland, just with different requests for if the road is going to come through. I'm just curious, I guess, as to sharing this information with the task force. Are we going to have a way? And I think early on too, the task force will recall that, folks were wanting to hear from, the local elected officials and local people. So are we going to have a process that we house these letters, whether it be for support or against or whatever, that people can review and take note of, and that the task force also have access to?
That's a great comment, Commissioner, because we have been tracking them within the department, but to make them available easily to the task force members is a great comment. So we'll work on getting that out on the website as well.
All right. Very good. I believe that's all the questions that we've got. I don't see any other hands out there. So anyway, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to you now. Well, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So Pegeen Hanrahan, are you? I see the hand again. I'm going to come to you. It looks like it's showing on my end that you're self-muted. If you could unmute your phone, if you have a question. All right, so you're showing unmuted now, but we don't hear anything. But we'll get with again. We'll get with you. Like I said, the technical briefing one-on-ones will be scheduled in the next. I know some of them have already started as far as the scheduling, but we're hoping to get those scheduled, completed by next week. So someone will be in touch with you, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to you before we start the public comment period.
All right, thank you, Greg. Take you a deep breath and a drink of water. You're really going at it here this morning. So as a formality, this will conclude our formal presentation today, and we're going to move into the public comment portion of our webinar. And I want to emphasize how important public input is to the process, and that commenting during our meetings and webinars is just one way for the public to provide their input to us. Always remember that we've got FDOT listens at dot.state.fl.us, where public can submit comments anytime, day or night, to be considered by the task force. I'm going to give one final thank you to the task force members. Stay healthy and stay safe. And Greg, let's go ahead and start the public comment period, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. We appreciate the public being patient with us. I know we're a few minutes behind, but we had a lot of good questions, and so we appreciate that from our task force members. We've received 165 requests to provide public comment, which, you know, with a 3-minute time limit will take approximately 8 hours. As always, we encourage everyone to stay engaged during this portion of the webinar. Requests to comment that were received by 5 p.m. yesterday will be addressed during the public comment period in the order the request was made. If you do not respond when you are called, we will provide a second chance at the end of the public comment period. We will identify the next 3 speakers so that you may prepare to comment. When your name is called to actually speak, we will unmute your line in order for you to provide comment within your allotted time of 3 minutes. The line will be muted after 3 minutes, so please watch the clock. There will also be a chime when you have 30 seconds remaining and another when your 3 minutes is complete. If you have more information to share with the group, you can provide additional comments in writing for further consideration. You can send comments anytime to fdot.state.fl.us. Only one person at a time will be unmuted. If you have self-muted yourself, please be sure to unmute before speaking. If you did not submit your comment in time to be addressed today, again, you can submit your email and your comments via email at the fdot.listens email address. The first 3 public speakers today will be Janet Marshall from Perry, Ethan Gilbert from Orlando, and Levi Hannon from Tallahassee. So like I said, the first speaker will be Janet Marshall. And I'm not for sure.
Okay, next up is Ethan Gilbert. Next up is Levi Hannon from Tallahassee, Florida. Next up is Donna McCollum from Ohio. Donna, you are unmuted. Donna McCollum from Ohio, you are unmuted. Last call for Donna McCollum. If not, we will circle back to you. Next up is Chris Costello from Nokomis, Florida. Chris, you are unmuted.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. To all of you this morning, our economy has been all but shut down and people are fighting for their lives or terrified that this virus will take a loved one. This is no time to rush forward. It is no time for a webinar to keep the MCORS process going. Task force member homework and briefings completed out of public view are not welcome. Let's be honest. The task force process was opaque and fruitless through 7 months of in-person meetings. And while FDOT staff and some task force members may be thrilled that the webinar has removed the public's right to visually display their opposition outside of the public comment period, the public is not. This webinar adds insult to injury. It is the opposite of democracy in action. For example, only 29 out of 121 public commenters made it through the virtual system for the Southwest Central webinar. 28 out of 29 were opposed to MCORS. Only 29 out of 135 public commenters made it through the system for for the Northern Turnpike webinar. 29 of 29 were opposed to MCORS. I personally expect task force members and FDOT staff who actually believe in transparency, democracy, and the responsibility of the state government to provide for its citizens to demand that this farce end. Exit now. Call it all off. Call it off now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Costello. Next up is Brian Barnes from Port Charlotte, Florida. Next up, Julie Conley from Monticello, Florida. Julie, you are unmuted. Julie Conley from Monticello, Florida, you are unmuted. Last call, Julie Conley from Monticello, Florida, you are unmuted. Julie will circle back to you. Moving on, Sandra Hodge from Coral Gables, Florida. Next up is Mary Louise Foster from Lamont, Florida. Next up is Jackson Hurst from Kennesaw, Georgia. Next up is Margot Robinson from Newport Richey, Florida. Next up is Carmen Monroy from Fort Myers, Florida. Next up is Dennis Blake from Old Town, Florida. Next up is Stella Myers from Fort Myers, Florida. Next up is Teresa Pinto from Lake City, Florida. Next up is Marion Ryan from Winter Haven, Florida. Next up is Pat Branch from Tampa, Florida. Next up is George Neves from Denellen, Florida. Next up is Eugene Kelly. Eugene, you are unmuted. Eugene, you are unmuted. Eugene Kelly, you are unmuted. Last call for Eugene Kelly. You are unmuted. We will circle back. Next up is John Kilgore from Tarpon Springs, Florida. Next up is Saban Gale from Lakeland, Florida. Next up is Delita Singh from Ocoee, Florida. Next up is Alex Priester from Winter Park, Florida. Next up is Michael Roth from Branford, Florida. Michael Roth,
hello.
you're unmuted.
You can hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Wonderful. First of all, I have to echo Ms. Costello's comments about this public comment thing doesn't seem to be working very well. And I'm uncomfortable in the fact that I can't even see if the task force members are still on the line to hear what I have to say, but I'm going to go ahead and read it up anyway. The perceived need for unrestrained growth has become a sacred cow, already stretching our bountiful inherited natural resources to their scientifically practical limit and requiring a plethora of often unsuccessful mitigation steps to attempt to restore flow levels to our waterways, eliminate pollution from our rivers and estuaries, and revive our disappearing springs. Putting a toll road through our agricultural expanses, environmentally sensitive spring sheds, and wetland recharge areas will encourage further development that can only serve to inhibit aquifer recharge and promote wetland destruction. Consider the touted benefits of these roads. Number one, to ease congestion. There is no congestion in the area proposed. In fact, roads currently running through the region are notoriously underutilized. There is no current problem with getting from one rural community to another. Another benefit, boosting rural economies. The rural lifestyle is a choice. We don't need to be saved. In most cases, the benefits touted by toll road supporters that come with the construction of major thoroughfares and related development are perceived as a threat to the lifestyle we chose, and many rural communities have already spoken up to say so. This plan puts our local businesses at risk of loss to the aquifer-sucking urban centers that will develop along these roads. Another advantage, hurricane evacuation, not generally recommended by the emergency services. Evacuation to local shelters is generally the preferred plan. Number four, 5G expansion, a carrot on a stick to the citizens of the state. 6-lane toll roads are not required to establish broadband connections. It's certain that the toll roads will not pay for themselves. COVID will have the state in financial hardship for years to come. Don't saddle poor rural taxpayers with the bill for roads designed to enhance the value of real estate holdings of wealthy landowners. Please recommend no build. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Up next is George King from Tampa, Florida. Next up is Lindsay Cross from St. Petersburg, Florida. Lindsay, you are unmuted.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I appreciate those of you that are still listening to the public comments. Hope you are all healthy and well. The COVID-19 pandemic is certainly demonstrating how vulnerable our state is. Research from Harvard University Schools of Public Health recently showed a link between poor air quality and increased mortality from COVID-19. Abundant and clean fresh water is critical for us to maintain good personal hygiene, and maintaining a supply of local food from our Florida farms can enhance our food security. All of these will be in jeopardy if we build this road to ruin. The benefits that are promised to small rural communities in the path of destruction, like broadband, simply come with too many strings attached. Levy County Commission recently took the bold and brave step of passing a no-build resolution this month because the residents there understand that the costs greatly outweigh the lauded benefits, which are based more on assumption than fact. Residents in other countries are also speaking up. Please listen to them. They know what is right for their community. Our state will be grappling with a budget deficit and economic uncertainty for years to come. The legislature and FDOT have never been able to show that this project is economically viable. During good economic times, this project was wasteful and unnecessary. Now, during a global health and economic crisis, building these roads would be negligent. So task force members, as you were challenged to look at avoidance and attraction areas, the homework should actually be quite easy. Color the entire area in dark magenta and avoid it all. The only thing that we can guarantee that this project will attract is more destruction of our natural areas, degradation of our water resources, and the dismantling of rural lifestyles. As always, and even more so now, the only responsible option is no build. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cross. Up next, Michael McGrath from Fort Myers, Florida. Michael, you are unmuted.
Good morning, folks. My name is Michael McGrath, and I'm an organizer for the Sierra Club and resident of Lee County. It's become fashionable to promote MCORs by holding rural communities hostage and forcing them to choose between broadband connectivity and a highway that runs straight through their backyard or no broadband at all. This is no choice at all because it's just not the truth. There are alternatives that are both cheaper, less environmentally damaging, and can accomplish the same goal. For example, aerial broadband is a well-documented service that can be done independently of interruption and for a fraction of the costs. We need real solutions, not toll roads to ruin. Don't build this road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGrath. Up next is Kenny Strickland from Monticello, Florida. Up next is Joseph Sheffield from Old Town, Florida. Up next is Nancy Oplix from Lake Pacascoffee, Florida. Up next is Michael Sachs from Ocala, Florida. Up next is Lynn Sparks from Monticello, Florida. Up next is Michael Sherman from Lecanto, Florida. Up next is Bob Fink from Tampa, Florida. Up next is Jenny Welch from Old Town, Florida. Jenny, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you for letting me speak. I am all for the no build. However, I'm also a realist. And looking at the avoidance maps, I will speak about the two proposed routes through Dixie County. Contrasting the two possible routes through Dixie County, US 19 has far fewer areas with designations of will not impact, including churches, cemeteries, people's farms and ranches, a wildlife refuge, and more. One important detail left out of the will not impact consideration is people's homes. Along County Road 349, there are dozens and dozens of people's homes that would have to be removed to build this road. The homes not removed would be forever impacted and their value drastically reduced by a toll road being built so close to them. I don't see, I guess my question is, when will this be covered, or will it be covered elsewhere? Also, with no local meetings having been held or scheduled here in Dixie County, most people are completely unaware of these two, that this road will possibly impact their homes along 349, and that their way of life will be forever altered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Welch. Up next is Marilee Mawich Gibson from Fort White, Florida. Marilee, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. The best option, as a member who has been attending these public meetings for the past several months, the best option that can be done at this point in time in our Florida history is to completely end this boondoggle today. The amount of money this is going to cost the taxpayers in Florida is an expense we can no longer afford. The road projects will bring urban sprawl to our most unadulterated areas of Florida. It's an unnecessary road promoting human encroachment and development. Especially during this COVID corona situation, the amount of money that is going into this project needs to be better planned for these types of episodes of pandemics and other health crises. As far as hurricanes go, sheltering in place needs to be recognized as the best option for what we do with hurricanes. This idea of this as an exit corridor for residents in Florida is preposterous. Jobs sacrificing the environment for construction only creates deforestation and destroys the natural buffering for storms. Highway 19 exists and is nowhere near capacity. Fossil fuel projects are a relic of our past and represent regression, not the progression that we need whatsoever. I implore the senators and the representatives that voted in favor of this project a year ago or so to rescind their vote that created such a wasteful expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilee. Up next is Kimberly Heiss from Delray Beach, Florida.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. So I've been listening to the public comments over the last few days. A lot of people are concerned that our tax member is listening, and when I listen to the beginning of these talks, when you guys go over your agendas, it doesn't seem like you're taking into account like what people are saying during this. A lot of people are suggesting no build. Is that an option? I mean, people have been asking for it. Every comment is basically asking for no build. What even is that? Is that an option? I guess someone mentioned it, that no build was an option. I'm not sure what that was in reference to, but if it is an option, obviously it should be taken, because what we're doing is we're asking ourselves, what can we give up for this road? You're talking about attraction areas. There are no attraction areas. On the map you showed before, you said attraction areas were these poor rural areas. Well, those are areas where people don't have access to broadband, right? Okay, so how are they getting in on this call? How are they, how do they even know about this? And how are they able to give their, it seems like a really convenient way of getting the least amount of resistance from this project by exploiting, again, people who are the least fortunate by giving them broadband at the expense of putting a toll road that they're going to have to pay to drive on through their houses and their homes. Not to mention, these roads in the north are going through the last best chance for the longleaf pine ecosystems and the black bear and everything else in this area that relies on the wildlife corridor for existence. The one in the south is really disturbing to me because it would cause the Florida panther to go extinct. These are all really like traumatic things for me right now, because I've been living in Florida my whole life and have watched the urban sprawl just go everywhere, and it's so terrible over here, and that's what you want. You're saying that these roads are going to bring economic benefits. It's not. You're just talking about things to avoid and ways to mitigate this road, when what you should be doing is just I don't know if you can, it's what power you have over this at this point, but if you can, tell them not to build the road, or recommend that they don't build the road. I don't know what you could possibly do to make it right, but it seems like you guys have power here, and it would be really nice to hear that reflected when you are talking about it and when the public can hear it. There's so many things wrong with this. I mean, the way this was passed, there's GIS maps, as someone said yesterday, is not science. There is no science behind these roads. No one asked for these roads. You're just looking at ways to mitigate the damage. It should not be built. This is like a Black Mirror episode. Please, whatever power you have, do not let these roads be built. Thank you.
Thank you. And up next is Ned Bayer from Tampa, Florida. Next up is Dennis Scott from Tallahassee, Florida. Next up is Chuck Dixon from Lecanto, Florida. Up next is Pamela McElroy from Gainesville, Florida. Up next is Loretta Welpin from Homosassa, Florida. Up next is Kim Wheeler from Williston, Florida. Kim, you are unmuted.
Unmuted for just one moment. I want to thank you all very, very much. You all have been placed in a very difficult situation with this MCORS process. It's been a legislated fast-track disaster, and you all have been trying to make it work. For that, I appreciate everything that you're doing because it is not a normal process. I also want to thank our county commissioners. I'm from Levy County. For listening to us, asking for our input. Thank you, Matt Brooks, Commissioner Brooks. We really appreciate everything that you and Rock Meeks have been doing, working on the task force, and for passing a no-build resolution. My question from the beginning has been, where is the data? Why was this legislated? And now why are we continuing with this expensive and flawed process when we are fighting this pandemic? There has been no meaningful analysis of the need for hundreds of miles of new roads. Also, there's been no documentation that this massive project will actually create permanent jobs in the rural areas as is being claimed. There has been no analysis of how local governments will be able to pay the increased costs of providing schools, water and sewer lines, and other needed services and infrastructure for the sprawling new subdivisions that may follow these roads. These roads will replace critically important, productive agricultural lands and open space. Also not taken into account are the impacts on and costs of protecting sensitive spring sheds that nourish Florida's drinking water, habitat for panthers, black bear, and other vulnerable wildlife. Our dwindling farmlands need to be protected now more than ever. Agriculture is second only to tourism in the revenues it brings in, and given everything that is happening in our country and around the world and climate change, and there are more than 100 reasons not to build these roads. In this era of limited fiscal resources, it is time to follow the state's well-vetted planning process to determine the best long-term solutions to address Florida's massive transportation needs. There are problems. I don't disagree with that. But we could not hastily charge ahead on costly and unnecessary new toll roads. We, the taxpayers, deserve nothing less. The MCORS process is data totally unrealistic. We believe our governor and representatives should repeal the MCORS legislation. Please do not pave over the Florida we love. Please, no build. Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Thank you. Up next is Helen Hoffman from the Villages, Florida. Up next is A. Warren from Homestead, Florida. Up next is Lisa DeCalio from Fort Myers, Florida. Up next is Mark Haver from Lakeland, Florida. Mark, you are unmuted.
Hi, thank you so much for having this webinar. I don't think that the road should be built for a variety of reasons. A road is going to be environmentally destructive no matter how much planning you put into it. There's just no way that construction of pavement will not degrade, fragment, and destroy key habitat. All these roads are really just detrimental because no one even asked for them. Like, I don't want to, I really don't want to pay more tolls in the first place. And now you're going to destroy Florida's wildlife because of it. Like, I'm 21 years old. I'm the biggest stakeholder in the health of Florida's environment. And it's disheartening to me to know that these 3 toll roads could really sacrifice some of the last land we have in Florida that is rural, that is wild. And with those roads comes urban sprawl. And you're encouraging growth in these places that should be left to the communities that already live there. It's almost like a gentrification of the rural areas, and that shouldn't be okay. On top of that, there aren't any environmental impact statements for these roads either, which is so devastating. It's almost as if like, yeah, it's bad, so we don't even want to like show y'all. It's like, like I might be a little hesitant about that one. That's kind of crazy of you. Not of you all. I know it's not really like your fault or anything, but yeah, with all that being said, I just don't think that it's the best solution for the future of Florida's transportation. It's not the best solution for the future of Florida's environment. People don't want it. I don't want to pay more tolls. No one wants to pay more tolls. There are so many other better public transit solutions that we can have to move people around the state and reduce congestion in places that actually have congestion, unlike this area. With that being said, I appreciate you taking our comments into consideration. And I really hope you choose the no build option. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haver. Up next is Joni Moran from Florida. Up next is Drew Martin from Lake Worth, Florida. Up next is Richard Packman from Clearwater, Florida. Up next is Ted Greenwald from High Springs, Florida. Up next is Peggy Rhodes from Donella, Florida. Up next is Whit Foster from Lamont, Florida, and Whit, you are unmuted. You are self-muted if you'd like to unmute on your end.
How do you do? It's Whit Foster. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Thank you to the group for trying to have a webinar. And my first comment is that I've heard numerous names been called out and nobody's been able to get on and provide their public comments. And so I think this whole effort to have webinars during the COVID crisis is flawed and very unfair to all of the public that wants to comment. I don't even know if the task force is hearing this, but I would implore every one of you to halt this process until we can have a open public meeting and not through these webinars where we can't review the data with you as a group. I am a resident landowner in Jefferson County and adamantly opposed. This is my first opportunity to express my concerns that the project is unnecessary, it's expensive, it's destructive to the environment. For me as a landowner, a longtime landowner in Jefferson County, the no build option is the only option I think that makes any sense. There have been call-ins that have expressed the concern about the lack of data, the lack of funding, the desire to oppose this whole process and how it's flawed and outside the normal channels of planning in Florida. And in particular, the public comment process has been unavailable to all of us out here that want to oppose the process. I'm hoping that we will be contacted, and I didn't understand the personal meetings that were trying to be set up, but nobody's contacted me as a landowner in Jefferson County for my input. So thank you. I hope we postpone this whole process and come to our senses.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Up next is Melanie Peter from Gainesville, Florida. Up next is Steve Nolan from Tallahassee, Florida. Up next is Joni Rampolo from Jupiter, Florida. Up next is Kay Andrews from Sebastian, Florida. Kay, you are unmuted.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Okay, hi. Yes, I live in Sebastian, Florida. I was born and raised on Florida's East Coast. You heard me speak out against the Southwest Central Florida Connector during Tuesday's task force and the Northern Turnpike Connector in yesterday's task force meeting. You'll know that after living in Germany for 15 years, we recently moved back so that our almost 4-year-old son can experience Florida's unique ecosystems. What I have not yet mentioned is that I'm also a botanist and a middle school science teacher. So when I speak out against these political pet projects, I'm not only speaking up for Florida's native plants and wildlife, but also speaking up for the rights of my students to enjoy the unique and wonderful natural places that Florida is lucky enough to still have. Having already spoken about the importance of maintaining and increasing the remaining acreage of healthy longleaf pine habitats during yesterday's task force, although those comments are equally relevant for the Suncoast Connector, today I'd like to add a bit about Florida's natural springs and the feasibility of these projects. The Suncoast Connector and its equally disastrous sister project, the Northern Turnpike Connector, would have vast negative impacts on at least 13 of our 30 Florida springs designated by the state as outstanding Florida springs, and 16 of Florida's 33 first magnitude springs as identified in the Florida Geological Survey Open File Report number 85. I would like to name these first magnitude springs by county so that you get an idea of the magnitude of havoc that these misguided projects could wreak. In Citrus County, Chassahowitzka, Homosassa, and Kings Bay Springs groups. In Gilchrist, Devil's Ear Spring and Siphon Creek Rise. In Jefferson, Wassissa Springs group. In Lafayette, Lafayette Blue Spring and Troy Spring. In Levy, Fanning Springs and Manatee Springs. In Madison, Madison Blue Spring. In Marion, Silver Glen Spring and the Rainbow Springs and Silver Springs groups. And in Taylor, Nuttall Rise and Steinhatchee River Rise. Florida has more first magnitude springs than any other state or even country. Yes, country. These springs are already in danger from nutrient pollution, seawater seepage, and declining flows. The Northern Turnpike and Suncoast connectors and their associated urban sprawl would cut through many of our spring sheds, further endangering them and the animals that call their waters home, in addition to our own drinking water. In yesterday's Northern Turnpike Task Force meeting, Will Watts responded to Zach Pruzak's question about how the novel coronavirus's effect on the state budget will affect the MCOR's budget by saying that, quote, MCOR's has to still meet both financial and environmentally feasibility, just like any other project. Which brings me to my closing point. I'd like to highlight the fact that mitigation efforts for similar past projects have been woefully inadequate, and there's no way to mitigate the permanent loss of endangered animals such as the Florida panther and their fragile ecosystems. Even if these roads avoid Florida's rapidly disappearing xeric ecosystems, longleaf pine habitats in our springs and our spring sheds, all of which may or may not have been identified as avoidance areas, new roads constitute major barriers to the movement and survival of Florida's unique plants and animals. For these reasons, I urge you no build. It is the only option for this environmentally and financially infeasible project. Thank you.
Thank you. Your time is up. Up next is Adam Morley from St. Augustine, Florida. Up next is Russell Hyatt from Bradenton, Florida. Up next is Tammy Cook Whedon from Okeechobee, Florida. Up next is John Olson from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Up next is Autumn Martinez from Jacksonville, Florida. Up next is Robert Lopez from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Up next is Laura Duplan from Tampa, Florida. Up next is Larry Grossman from Sarasota, Florida. Up next is Joanna Barron from Tavares, Florida. Up next is Daphne Green from Tampa, Florida. Up next is Catherine Beck from Tallahassee, Florida. Up next is James Shirk from Tampa, Florida. Up next is Jen Lohnberg from St. Augustine, Florida. Up next is Joyce Palmer from Crystal River, Florida. Up next is Maura Crystal from Gainesville, Florida. Up next is Michael Kroll from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Up next is Robin Williams from Sarasota, Florida. Up next is Willie the Lucin from Hawthorne, Florida. Willie, you are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. Go ahead.
Oh, well, this is a nice surprise. I didn't know I was on the list, but I'm glad I am. I would like to echo all the earlier comments I heard and say that I feel after hearing all the evidence and questions that no bill seems to be the only option here. We have to protect rural Florida, and there's no need to put it at risk to become developed like the rest of Florida, and we need to protect the diversity in Florida. Ruralness is diversity, as well as urban areas. So the few rural areas we have left, we need to protect for wildlife, for people, for a way of life, so that people in Florida can experience all different ways of life. And there's no need for the road, so I say no build. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Willie. The next person up is Robert Roscoe. Robert, you're unmuted. You just need to self-mute, unmute on your end. Robert Roscoe, you've been unmuted. It looks like you switched to your phone, so you just need to enter the audio pin.
Robert Ruskow, you've been unmuted. You are self-muted.
I can't. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I have a bunch of items since the attorneys are there. First of all, I won a lawsuit against DOT in 2005 on the Florida Sunshine Law. It's case Roscoe v. Abreu. Basically, it distinguished what types of meetings were sunshine law violations. To make it short, essentially, if it's just informational and no decisions are being made, then it is not applicable. It is applicable if decisions are being made. And in this case, there's a deliverable at the end. I'm a little confused about people talking about a no build coming out of this without a PD&E study, or I don't know what this no build means in this context. The other thing is that it seems that we are not getting the materials that the members have for these meetings until after the meetings, and they have no comments, but we don't know what they saw. And then we get links afterwards. So I don't know how we can really participate according to the Sunshine Law. The other thing is that the Sunshine Law requires, what I'm very leery of are these technical meetings. They have to be recorded. We have to see the materials that these people are doing. This sounds like, to me, a perfect in-run, typical DOT in-run around the Florida Sunshine Law. We've just finished up with the Suncoast 2, which is a total and complete mess. We've had 20 violations. We keep suing, but we just can't keep suing on every violation. The other thing is, this has not been mentioned at all, that this is an 8-lane road. The Suncoast 2 is an 8-lane road. They're calling it a 4-lane. If you go to the internet, it's a 4-lane road. It's also 134 million. It's actually, that's the construction costs from Lane Construction out of Milan, Italy. And basically, it's a $220 million road. I can understand the concern of the truck rest areas, but I think this should all be done on I-75. The other problem I have, Charles Lee had mentioned about the GIS not having measuring area. That's like having a baby set. That I have a GIS system. All the GIS systems, our county government has a GIS
Mr.
system.
Ruskow, your time is up.
Okay.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Sarah Mapes from Sarasota, Florida. Sarah Mapes, you are unmuted. However, you have not entered your PIN, so we just resent you a PIN. We will circle back or give you a second. Sarah Mapes, you are unmuted on our end. Last call for Sarah Mapes. We will circle back. Next up is Cindy Vieira from Ocala, Florida. Up next is Chris McCurdy from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Up next is Carl Hildebrand from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Up next is Mark McQueen from Panama City, Florida. Up next is Meredith Budd from Naples, Florida. Up next is Erica McCaughey from Bonita Springs, Florida. Up next is Larry Schwartz from Ponte Vedra, Florida. Up next is Carol Pratt from Naples, Florida. Up next is Bill Keating from Miami Beach, Florida. Up next is Karen Shearer from Fort Myers, Florida. Up next is Caroline Torello from Tallahassee, Florida. Up next is Dave Consor from Gainesville, Florida. Up next is Adrian Barman from Hollywood, Florida. Up next, Tim Nowak from Odessa, Florida. Up next is JT Shields from Tallahassee, Florida. Up next is Matthew Shorts from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Matthew Shorts, you are unmuted.
Have you got me?
Yes, sir, you're logged in twice.
Wow, I'm getting some massive feedback. Let me see what I can do here.
Here we might have.
Give me.
You still there? Mr. Shorts from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm gonna give you just a second. Mr. Schwartz, you are logged in twice. If we don't get you back on, we will circle back. Give you one more second. Mr. Schwartz, you are unmuted.
Is that me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it must have been something I had going on here. So I want to read a little paragraph to start out. And I'm Matthew Schwartz, I'm director of the South Florida Wildlands Association, and we're a regional organization in South Florida committed to protecting wildlife and habitat in our region, but also work throughout Florida and want to support the many people here and their great comments. So ready to plan your next adventure in a land far removed from city lights and traffic noise? Florida's Nature Coast is an area of almost 1 million acres where it is easy to discover the real Florida. Dense forests, prairies, and blackwater rivers, ample opportunities to exist for trail hiking, kayaking, bicycling, fishing, bird watching, and many other activities. Even so, you are never far from a town, some quaint and historically significant, where you can still enjoy the comforts of home. And notice that looking at new subdivisions and new roads is not a part of that description. That comes from FloridaNatureCoast.org. the organization also lists 96 parks and preserves running through Florida's nature coast from north of Tampa to the Apalachicola National Forest, basically all contiguous with the potential routes for this road. What these parks and preserves and region needs as a whole is habitat connectivity, definitely not the kind of fragmentation this highway, as well as the new developments which will be built along it, is going to bring. As a state, we also need far more than the $30 million we got last year for Florida Forever, the $100 million we got this year, and that's if we even get this, because the coronavirus is going to put a big damper on Florida's budget, surely not the billions of dollars this entire MCORS project is going to cost. I want to also mention the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So in addition to the public lands, this is their basic list of endangered and threatened species in North Florida: 5 mammals, 7 birds, 9 reptiles, 3 amphibians, 2 fish, and 1 crustacean. It also lists 22 species of plants that are listed as endangered. Depending on the route selected, there is going to be impacts to all these federally listed wildlife and plants and to jurisdictional wetlands. And that's going to trigger a very different kind of review, because that's going to bring in NEPA. That's the federal process, something the state obviously didn't want to be part of this process. I'm talking about a review because it was rejected during the legislative hearings when somebody suggested, why don't we do a study first for a year and then commit to doing these projects? But that was rejected by the legislature. They went full bore to approving the project and the funding for it. A major project of this kind impacting wetlands, rivers, endangered wildlife is going to require the EIS. And that's going to be a very different process than we have right now. It's going to start with scoping comments where people are going to be allowed to bring up the issues that should be addressed, and then a range of reasonable alternatives. Among those range of reasonable alternatives is going to be the no build option. And that's going to be compared to this. And we'll have a chance to do a full federal review. And if it doesn't work there, we'll take it to yet another venue and we'll see how this works out. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Up next is Daryl Barwish from Tallahassee, Florida. Mr. Barwish, you are unmuted. Daryl Barwish from Tallahassee, Florida, you are unmuted. One more time. Daryl Barwish from Tallahassee, Florida. We will circle back to you. Up next is Ryan Orgera from Sanibel, Florida. Up next is Charmaine Inglesman Robbins from Venice, Florida. Up next is Naveen Narway from St. Petersburg, Florida. Up next is Stephen Liedner from Miami, Florida. Up next is Janet Barrow from Dunellen, Florida. Up next is Eleanor Blitzer from Fort Myers, Florida. Up next is Wendy Harvey from Atlantic Beach, Florida. Wendy, you are unmuted.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not an eloquent speaker, but I am a lifelong resident of Florida who's very concerned about preserving our beautiful Florida springs. From the map, it appears that the springs are prioritized as an avoidance area, but also from the map, it looks like the avoidance and the attraction areas intersect. And I was disappointed that that was not better explained or emphasized during the presentation. And unfortunately, when anybody ever says that when avoidance areas cannot be avoided, then steps will be taken to minimize and mitigate. And those are two really vague terms that are open to individual interpretation. So that worries me. Florida is a tourist state, not only for the high-priced amusement parks that we have here, but for the tropical paradise of its outdoor recreation areas. And whatever roads are needed for the future of Florida, these areas need to be avoided because millions of residents enjoy them for recreation. When you ruin these spots that both the residents and the tourists have enjoyed for decades, you help destroy what attracts people to Florida in the first place to spend their recreation dollars. So it's as much an environmental decision as it is a business one. And I would like to echo Ms. Costello's comments at the beginning about slowing this process down to include more public members. It's disappointing that so many people, of course, because of work or whatever concerns, could not participate who wanted. But really, it just looks like this is getting rushed through otherwise. So unless this process can be made more transparent to more people, I'm in favor of no build. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Harvey, for your comment. Up next is Christopher Bremo from Clearwater, Florida. Up next is Julene Beck from Miami, Florida. Up next is Charles Stone from Fort Myers, Florida. Up next is Debbie Culp from Fort Myers, Florida. Up next is John Giermer from Tampa, Florida. Up next is Linda Smythe from Florida. Up next is Michelle Arsenio from Monticello, Florida. Up next is Janet Moklan from Lauderdale by the Sea.
Okay.
Up next.
Hello.
Are you there,
Hi.
Janet? Go ahead.
Yep, I'm here. One comment I wanted to know is if the Florida wildlife corridor is also laid over that map, is one of the layers. for the GIS map. And otherwise, I know a lot of time and effort has gone into this project and money, but the roads aren't needed or haven't proven to be needed. We don't need job growth. Florida's unemployment rate was below 3% last year before the virus, which is below natural unemployment. And I just think it's more important to think long-term about our water supply, clean air, open spaces for wildlife, and not indulging, a wealthy land developer just so he can flex his political muscles. So I know it's hard to put all this work into a project and then see it killed, but I think that's the right long-term decision, is no build. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mrs. Mocklin. Up next is Mary Shabbat from Punta Gorda, Florida. Mary, you are unmuted. You are self-muted. If you'd like to unmute on your end. Mary Shabbat, you are unmuted on our end. If you'll unmute on yours so you can speak. Mary Shabbat, you are unmuted on both ends. Ms. Shabbat, we'll give you one last try. If not, we'll circle back. You are unmuted on our end, and it appears to be unmuted on yours. All right, we'll circle back, Ms. Shabbat. Up next is Ingrid Ramirez from Vallecro, Florida. Up next is Allison Date from Tampa, Florida. Up next is Dalton Deese from Cedar Key, Florida. Up next is Paula Purvis from Florida. Up next is Donna White from Lakeland, Florida. Up next is Oscar Sikes from Gainesville, Florida.
Hello, fellow task force members. My name is Oscar Sikes, and I'm a college student from Gainesville. And as a student of GIS and geography, I know that what the assumptions you come in with for a GIS map, such as one you've all worked on, will determine the results you're going to get. So if we just back up to our basic assumptions, I really hope that rather than talking about where to put this road, we really talk about unequivocally rejecting this road together. And throughout my life, I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time outdoors, right where this road's proposed. I've walked across the entirety of Madison, Jefferson County, and I've had the fortune of bringing other young Floridians out to these places, the kind of places I hope our kids and grandkids can one day explore and thank us for preserving. When I talk to people in these communities, they tell me how much they value their rural way of life and their tight-knit rural communities and the unique ecosystems. And from the start, it was clear how this toll road threatens what these communities hold dear. And I urge you to go out and listen to these communities are going to be affected. They don't want them. If you look at the Levy County Commission's recent resolution. And now with COVID-19, we're in a public health and economic crisis like we've never seen before. In the years ahead, we're going to have to tighten our belts. And we desperately need to put state funding to support our communities here and in the years to come, saving businesses from collapse, saving lives through testing and contact tracing, keeping our schools funded, not putting tens of billions of dollars into a boondoggle that only the transportation industry wants. And also, in your own lives, I think you know the difference between talking through tough issues with a loved one through something like Zoom versus in real life. And if we think about the situation we're in now, this process can't be fast-tracked when people in Florida are trying to navigate a crisis and communities can't talk through these issues together in person. We need to wait until it's safer to be able to talk about these issues. And at the end of the day, we have the sacred responsibility of deciding what kind of Florida we're going to be giving to my generation and the generation after us. Will it be a Florida where we talk about our springs, our amazing ecosystems, our recreational economy, our rural way of life in the past tense? The choice is ours. I appreciate all the hard work you're doing throughout this process, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sikes. Up next is Sarah Younger from High Springs, Florida. Sarah, you are unmuted.
Oh, good day. Yes, my name is Sarah Younger. I live in Alachua County, and I am also serving as the chair of the Suwannee St. John Sierra Club. I would add that our group covers much of the area that this corridor is proposed to now have a route through. Oscar was right on. I mean, it's quite evident what a sham this presentation is right now. I'm sorry to say the majority of people whose names you've called out have been unable to add their comment. I think it's quite clear that we have to rethink this at this time. The opportunity to hear from residents, members of our community who would be greatly impacted by these roadways is just not possible in the conditions of today's pandemic. So I'm urgently asking you to reconsider the need for this roadway. We have very clear objectives that will be coming forward in the coming months to get our society back on track after the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, I had very real issues, and our group did as well, with the choice of a toll road through these portions of our state. We have clearly a way of life, not just the rural way of life, but also wildlife that are in these areas that need to be protected. Our aquifer also, the wetlands that serve our communities as the recharge areas for the Floridan aquifer serve millions throughout the state. So I believe that our group will continue to stay informed despite COVID, but I urge you to rethink the choice of making this a priority right now, as many of our members, as well as others in our community, are impacted by COVID and cannot assign the time that it takes to be present on these online meetings, as there's no in-person meetings allowed. So thank you for taking the time to hear me. I urge you to rethink this process, and we'll be urging our membership to also assign some time, if they can, to add their comments where they're made available. But it is exceedingly difficult getting the attention of people in these times. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Up next is Karen Holland from Wellington, Florida.
All right. Good afternoon. Yes, 12:03. Thank you for this opportunity to speak my mind, and I know that I am a faceless voice for a webinar, but I'm hoping that my impassioned tone will reach somebody who's in charge of this whole project. And I know it's a big undertaking, and Brandy, you're doing a great job as a facilitator. I'd also like to mention that people who are having trouble speaking need to go onto their phones and tap that little icon and speak their voice. It's a really important thing to say how you feel about this project. And I hear a lot of no buildings, and I really appreciate what other people have said, so I don't have to repeat any of it. And I know that I represent a lot of different people here in Wellington, which is right down the street from President Trump. And well, I don't know how he feels about this, but Governor DeSantis, I know, really wanted it. I was up in Tallahassee, well, about 2 years ago when this bill went through, and very disappointed because, like everybody else said so far, or most everybody, it's something that will only destroy what we have. And just like Joni Mitchell said, don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone. And once it's gone, you can't replace it. And I know it's a treasure. It's a treasure for all of us who are here. And I really wonder if anybody on the task force really understands what that means emotionally and monetarily. Yeah, we have this pandemic going on. And I heard someone, I don't remember everybody's names, but I heard somebody on the task force and the truck industry say that there's a time factor because of the pandemic. And how long is it going to take to build this road? Are we still going to be in the pandemic? And I understand that we need to bring those supplies to people who are in need, but at what cost? Once again, at what cost? And we're digging a deeper hole. And if we continue this way and don't slow it down, the hole's just going to get deeper and deeper, and people really aren't going to be served the way they really need to be at this moment in history and time. I think there's a lot more that needs to be said, and well, I feel passionate about it. I feel passionate about the animals and about the springs and all those wonderful things that we need for peace of mind, especially now during this pandemic. We need to go out there and enjoy outdoors, and the birds have come back, and it's a wonderful thing because of the pandemic, but people are dying and their needs come first, which isn't necessarily the roads. It's let's go ahead and rethink this whole thing. So thank you all. Thank you for listening. And I hope everybody understands that icon needs to be pressed so they could be heard as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Up next is Annie McCann from Florida. Up next is Joe Bordano from Bonita Springs, Florida. Up next is Christopher Posey from Fort Myers, Florida. Up next is Haley Underwood from Fort Myers, Florida. Up next is Herman Younger from Gainesville, Florida. Herman, you are unmuted.
Thank you. My name is Herman Younger. I'm a organizing representative for the Sierra Club based here in Gainesville, Florida. To ensure that the basic needs of Floridians are met during and after the COVID-19 pandemic will require an unprecedented fiscal response at a time when our state's primary revenue sources may be severely diminished. A recent analysis by 1,000 Friends of Florida found that the total cost of the disastrous proposed M-Course toll roads could be more than $21 billion. How reckless and shameful of our state to continue to put the needs of private interests and polluters over the needs of the elderly, the immunocompromised, the frontline healthcare workers, and the working class. Enough is enough. Our taxpayer dollars must be used to fund our fight against COVID-19. We the people will bear the brunt of your reckless decisions if you continue to fund this useless toll road project. Floridians' lives are in your hands. Defund MCORS now and recommend no build. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Younger. Up next is Carrie Cringer from Jeffersonville, Indiana. Up next is Wanda Clough from Naples, Florida. Wanda, you are unmuted. Wanda Clough, you are unmuted.
No comment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next is Mindy Dickman from Miami, Florida. Mindy, you are unmuted.
Hello?
Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm very fired up about this. There are only a few wild places left in Florida, and as a mother and a teacher, for my children, for future generations, I will never sit by and watch this monstrosity be built. This is a waste of time, including your own. Florida is not well. Go on the PantherNet website. An unknown neurological disease is plaguing the Panthers right now, and they don't even know what it is. Not to mention the plague, what's plaguing humans. And when it rains this summer and the Lake Okeechobee overflows again with water, and there's another devastating algal bloom, that kills all kinds of animals, including humans, which studies have proven it kills humans. Talk to some fishermen and ask them, what's it like around the coast of Florida? Are you catching any fish? And they're going to tell you they're not. Watch a fishing show. They're conservationists now because they understand the animals are almost gone. Talk to a gladesman, the people, these rural people. What does it look like out there? It's a lot different than it used to look. So this is a big waste of time, and we need to be spending our time wisely right now with so much going on. And why is all of this happening? Because the ecosystems have been broken up by highways and canals, and here we are talking about building another one on the last little bit that's left in Florida. Also, there's too much concrete, not enough dirt. Water gets reabsorbed into the ground and refills the aquifers that Floridians rely on for drinking water. Biscayne Bay is seeing the effects of sea level rise. Actually, the whole state is. Without a full aquifer, salt water seeps inland and overflow, and we're going to have overflowed septic tanks. It's going to be a hot mess. But there's not any fish there anyway to kill. So, task force, throw your binders away and get to work on something that would really help our state. Educate yourself. Read Priceless Florida, a book used at the University of Florida's ecology class. Educate yourself and learn about how nature works. We are all a part of it. This is old news. You need to catch yourself up on it. You don't want to be on the wrong side of history. And saying you didn't know any better is no excuse. For 8 years, the governor of Florida did not allow staff to use the word climate change. Go look at Florence, Italy. We are at sea level. We will be the first state in the country to see the effects of what's going to happen. Time to be proactive and get to work on things that really matter. The only choice is to not build.
Thank you, Mrs. Dickman. Your time is up. Up next is David Hastings from St. Petersburg, Florida. You are unmuted, Mr. Hastings. David Hastings from St. Petersburg, Florida. You are unmuted. Last call for Mr. Hastings, and then we'll circle back. Next up is Gloria McCarthy from Daytona Beach, Florida. Up next is Frances Higgins from Melbourne, Florida. Up next is Suzanne House from Tampa, Florida. And Suzanne, you are unmuted. You are self-muted if you'd like to unmute yourself. Suzanne House, you are unmuted on our end. If you will unmute on your end so that you can speak. Last call for Mrs. House, and then we'll circle back. Up next is Terry Bridge from Bradenton, Florida. Up next is Keely Sayers from Florida. Keely, you are unmuted. You are self-muted on your end. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. As you stated, I live in Levy County, and I'm actually probably less than a mile away from US 19 as the crow flies, so the whole co-location thing scares the mess out of me. I have a family and a job and a business as a small business owner, so the idea that a year or two from now that we wouldn't be able to live here anymore, it just scares me. But I'll get away from that. I had a idea while we were sitting here talking and listening to everybody's comments. I hear a lot about the hurricane evacuation being used, usually from people who don't live up here or haven't probably even evacuated from a hurricane. And to me, expanding a coastal region for hurricane evacuation doesn't really make sense. I would see more effective expansion on like I-75, for example, something that runs straight up through the state. You've seen hurricanes go through on the East Coast, you've seen them go through on the West Coast, you've seen them come right up the center of the state, but you don't find out until the very end which direction the hurricane's going to go. So the safest route would honestly be to evacuate up the center of the state, in my opinion, but that's, again, just my thought process on that. The other thing too, with springs, I hear a lot of people mentioning that the springs owned or known to the government. A lot of people here in Levy County, in Dixie County, they have springs that are on their own properties. So when you talk about the detriment to the wildlife, to the ecosystem, to the watersheds, to the Swanee River, God, I don't even want to get started on that, because that's just, that would be a whole nother 3-minute segment. But you have a lot of springs that are actually privately owned. So none of those are ever going to be taken into account. And it just saddens me to hear that it would just be bowled over and, you know, the state would buy up the property and be gone. So that was really what I wanted to say. I'm all for no build. I'm originally from Wisconsin. We have a horrible road system because of 8 months of winter and no toll roads. And I've never seen a benefit to the toll roads ever. And a limited access road is never going to create anything except rest stops. And that's deceiving for people who live out in, for example, Dixie County, Lafayette, Taylor, because they don't know any better. They think that it's going to create jobs for them, and it's just not. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is A. Walcott from Hollywood, Florida. Up next is Susan Caruso from Wilton Manors, Florida. Susan, you are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I am from Broward County, but I still have a dog in this fight for several reasons. First and most important to me is my 5 grandchildren that live here in Florida and love the outdoors, as do I. Secondly, I'm a taxpayer. Third, we have a cabin that we built. We didn't have it built, we built it ourselves up in the Swanee River Valley. And 4, I believe in democracy, and I believe that it's supposed to be the will of the people. And this project, not just the process, the whole project, is anything but that. And I can state some of my thoughts on that. First of all, the people voted overwhelmingly to use money to purchase land for Florida Forever, and a pittance. I don't know if this, really any money's been spent on purchasing land for that purpose, for keeping Florida wild forever. And yet, our legislators, the bipartisan, by the way, group of legislators who voted for this, are more than happy to spend millions of dollars on purchasing up rural land and developing it. So that's not for the people, obviously, by all the comments we've heard. Secondly, one of the goals supposedly of the task force is to increase communication. And yet, now that the coronavirus won't let us meet face to face, everybody has to meet by communication. So the people that are supposed to be helped by this project, they can't comment. How are they going to connect if their connectivity is not working? So that's certainly not by the people. Hurricane evacuation. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, and we now know millions of people are, you can't afford to gas up your car, grab your family, go up to rest stop after rest stop and purchase food and find a hotel or a motel. That is not feasible. So that's not for the people. So what we should be doing is spending the money directly on not development, but progress, which means improving the quality of life for people, like giving small business loans, giving, shoring up shelters in place and making them more safe for people to shelter in place, by creating job programs, by creating better communication. I've never seen a toll road that goes up to a cell phone tower. I believe it's only service roads. So this process is not democratic. So until it is, I think we should either stop the project, no build, or delay until this whole thing can be sorted out and quit wasting more money. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Jake Zidek from Tampa, Florida. Jake, you are unmuted.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, this is Jake Zidek. I'm an environmental scientist and a PhD candidate in ecology at USF. Thanks to the facilitators for getting us through this IT struggle. So yeah, one thing I want to say, if this whole project, MCOR's project, wasn't so disappointing, it would kind of remind me of that episode of The Simpsons with the monorail, where the con man cons the whole city into building this lemon of a transit project. The main difference is people weren't involved in this process. Instead of having a con man con all of us into it, it was just pushed through our quick little legislative session up in Tallahassee, out of sight of the public. Also, as many other commenters have pointed out, this horrible transit scheme also has the added features of destroying so much habitat. I think it's kind of bizarre, especially with COVID. This is like a little miniature version of the COVID bailouts in a lot of ways. We have these conservative politicians who are all about minimizing government spending until they or one of their buddies wants to subsidize a get-rich-quick scheme. So anyway, I'm glad to hear people on the task force mentioning no build, especially in light of the discrepancies about GIS map layers. It seems everyone's has to pipe up like, oh, you forgot about this. It seems like, the map would be all painted magenta if everyone had a chance to bring up the things that they thought were important and which are in fact important. So yeah, glad to hear them talking about no build, because yeah, it's kind of scary when they're talking about, oh, maybe we'll pave over these spring sheds, as if that was an option. So yeah, otherwise, yeah, don't have, that on the environmental thing. I don't really buy the, the trickle down economics of this thing bringing economic prosperity somehow to the people who buy Starbucks, Walmart, whatever other stuff for a toll road, not even a real road, just a toll road. So yeah, hope they do no build. And if they do, quit psyching us out in the meantime. Just end it now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Jeffrey Shapiro from Gainesville, Florida. Up next is Diana Imperi from Pembroke Pines, Florida. Diana, you are unmuted.
Okay, you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am, we sure can. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, thank you. Yeah, so I'm speaking on behalf of the Night Sky Conservancy of Florida, which is an affiliate of the International Dark Sky Association. And first, just as other people commented, I'm concerned about the way that these webinars have gone on. A lot of names have been called that have not spoken. But I'm particularly troubled that that I have no way of making eye contact with the task force members who we're really trying to address. Because it's not just words. We want you to see our emotions. We want you to see that for some of us, we're almost at the border of tears, trying to convince you why this is such a wrong thing to do. One of the things that I have been wanting for FDOT to do is to add GIS layers that depict the light polluted areas that we have in Florida, so that you can see firsthand, so that each task members can see the amazing resource we still have in some of these corridors where you want to build these highways. These naturally dark areas are an important resource for wildlife, fireflies, bats, all kinds of animals, including pollinators and plants that we have in our farms. And it's also a cultural heritage for our own children. I'm looking right now at an article that came up in New York Times about Schiefland, which happens to be right in the midst of this corridor area. And it says, in an astronomy village, a hush falls at night as the sky turns dark and the stars appear. Roofs roll back and telescopes aim for the heavens. All the neighbors are stargazing and nobody turns on the lights. Amateur astronomers, frustrated by the artificial light that obscures stars over most of our urban and suburban backyards, have learned to chase darkness in remote areas. It goes on to describe somebody from Boca Raton who has a second home in Schiefland, and he says, this is a gathering of people who haven't lost the sense of wonder, and we're here because of this beauty. So I implore you to please take this thing into consideration. Aside from that, we're losing agricultural lands at a ridiculous pace. What we should be doing is investing our public dollars on programs like the Rural and Family Land Program in Florida Forever, so that we can tackle things like pollution, soil regeneration, protection of our wetlands, of our watersheds, and of course of our own food. I live here in Broward, where it seems like we're constantly under construction of new roads. And I'm telling you, you start building some, then you're going to start needing more and more. Before you know, we lost our rural lands. So please go for a no bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Gail Koslag from Dunellen, Florida. Up next is Seymour Rosen from Tallahassee, Florida. Up next is Scott Hutter from Tallahassee, Florida. Up next is Miha Preda from Miami, Florida. Miha, you are unmuted. You are self-muted. If you'd like to unmute on your end. There you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. My name is Mihai Preda. I'm a teacher. I'm calling from Miami. I'm working with the Fridays for Future student movement here in Miami. Our students go to our local elected officials and ask them to declare a climate emergency and to act on it. And we had some success. Miami and Miami Beach and a few other towns have already declared the climate emergency. I know that in the past, the government of Florida banned its officials from using the words climate change and global warming, but I read that our new governor is more interested in science. So let's talk about climate change. Burning fossil fuels raises the temperature of the earth, and which leads to sea level rise, wildfires, and so on. We know this for a very long time. In 2018, a devastating report came from UN, which said that we have 12 years to limit catastrophe. And to avoid it, the world requires to transform the economy at a speed and scale that has no documented historic precedent. This was in 2018. We are now in 2020, which means we have only 10 years left. Building new toll roads and power plants takes us exactly in the opposite direction. So the question is, do we want to leave our children a livable planet or not? So I urge every member of the task force to do this. Look their children in the eyes and decide for themselves, are their children worth saving the world? If they decide the answer is yes, great. You know what to do. Cancel the project. You can read the science for yourself. You don't need us to tell you. But let's say you look your children in the eyes and decide that this project is just too good an opportunity to pass. Okay, then tell them, listen, I'm sorry I pushed you so hard to study. Why don't you take some time to enjoy life, the outdoors, the beach? You know, they're not going to be here forever, you know? And so if you want to keep studying, sure, you can do that, but you're not gonna need it. So this is our basic choice here. Do we want to leave our children a livable planet or not? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Mike Ewald from Coral Gables, Florida. Up next is Deborah Schuer from Gainesville, Florida. Up next is Kate McFall from Tallahassee, Florida. Kate, you are unmuted.
Hi, thanks so much
I've been listening to these meetings. It just seems so clear the public, truly from their comments overwhelmingly is opposed to building the toll roads. It seems more apparent now than ever before. I just have a quick request and someone else said this earlier, but to echo, I guess, that request to include the wildlife corridors on all of your maps going forward. And thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Leona Geiger from Tallahassee, Florida. Up next is John Quarterman from Georgia, sorry. John, you are unmuted. You are self-muted. If you'd like to unmute on your end.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. Go ahead with your comment.
All right, that's Ahara, Georgia, but more importantly, I'm the Suwannee Riverkeeper, and I and all our members in Florida and Georgia are concerned with keeping the waters clean throughout the entire Suwannee River Basin in both states. In the webinar, we heard that there was a possibility of avoidance or don't build in certain corridors, but otherwise, we'd get what we heard repeatedly described as the normal course of business by the Department of Transportation, which is to minimize and ameliorate. Okay, well, who's supposed to prove this? And in any case, it's backwards. The Suwannee River is an outstanding water of Florida. That's supposed to mean that anyone who wants to develop has to prove they're not going to damage the river, not the other way around. Similarly, for the outstanding springs, it should be the burden of proof on the Department of Transportation, not everybody else, to prove that there is no such effect, and they can't do it. And as far as who should be trying to do it the wrong way around to prove to an unelected, unrepresentative task force, the task force, as we heard earlier, doesn't even have a process to distribute letters from county governments. And when the recent resolution by Levy County was brought up, we heard, oh, well, we've asked Levy County to reach out to us. That's just plain backwards. The burden of proof should be on the Department of Transportation, not everybody else. And for that matter, why is this task force still looking for need? That should have been settled before the task force was ever formed. It can't be, of course, because there is no need. What is there need for? Well, we need water quality testing on the rivers. The city of Valdosta is doing that on the Withlacoochee River all the way to the state line 3 times a week. It seems that the state of Florida could do the rest all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. We need solar panels and batteries so people are not without power after hurricanes. Yes, we need rural broadband, but we don't need a toll road to get it. Why not just directly fund these other things that would actually be a benefit to the regions that are in the study areas and do away with the toll road? As a farmer, I know if you're digging a fence post and it's hard digging, the thing to do is not to form a task force and ask for public comment through a webinar. The thing to do is stop digging. And that's what the task force should do, vote no, build, and adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Grant Gilhart from Tallahassee, Florida. You are unmuted.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you folks for putting on the webinar. It's been a long, I've been sitting here for 2 hours trying to get on. But I think webinars do help. It helps me in the sense I don't have to go to the meeting. I can be working here at the house and listen to the webinar. But down to the main points here. I think the main point is this whole thing is done backwards. There has been no determination of need for this road. DOT generally puts out does a study and identifies where there's a need for a new road before they start planning a new road. There is really no traffic problems in this area. It's not relieving any traffic problems. The road from Wildwood to Crystal River and the road from Crystal River to Monticello has not been identified in the DOT's long-range plans as need to improve. I drive US 19 a lot, and the road is virtually deserted. There is really not a lot of traffic on that road. To build a parallel road to US 19 does not make any sense. The toll roads are supposed to pay for themselves. This toll road will never pay for itself. A feasibility study and economic viability study should be done first and not as the last step in this process. There was some discussion before about other roads that have been built without a proper study. Bow Bridge comes to forefront, a bridge built in the Panhandle that there was absolutely no need for, and the bridge toll is not paying for itself. The Suncoast Parkways had flawed analysis, and they stated that the road would be paying for itself. The Suncoast Parkway is not paying for itself currently. These roads will be going through areas that need prescribed burns. You cannot do a prescribed burn on a major highway. They've done a prescribed burn in Payne's Prairie a number of years ago, and it ends up closing down I-75, and there was a major traffic accident. So to minimize the impact on the resources is virtually impossible. You can't truly mitigate any of these things. Again, no build alternative is the only alternative that makes sense here. If the DOT wants to do a study and justify it, maybe that should be something they could do. I do like the webinars. I think all future meetings should have both live meeting and a webinar access. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Michael Likes from Tampa, Florida. Up next is Stefano Miranda from Florida. Up next is Douglas Brown from Lake City, Florida. Douglas, you are unmuted.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. Go ahead.
Hi there, I've been a member of volunteer environmental organizations for over 30 years, and I'm very, very concerned about what direction that Florida is going. We're paving over everything. We're damaging with the aquifer. We won't have enough clean water to drink. And this is just another example of another boondoggle project to enrich already rich folks at the expense of poor people, the environment, and wildlife. No bill. This is the way this thing needs to go. And hopefully DOT and their analysis and maybe some environmental impacts, if they do them, assessments, will be able to show the legislature that this is not a good idea, and it will have a negative impact on the future of Florida tourism, the economy, if we ever recover from the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Up next, Sid Flannery from Tampa, Florida. Up next is Hunter Miller from Lake Wales, Florida. Up next is Douglas Starling from Monticello, Florida. Up next is Mabel Patterson from Riverview, Florida. Up next is Maxine Connor from Homosassa, Florida. Maxine?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. You are unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you. I volunteer as co-chair for the Solar and Clean Transportation Committee of the League of Women Voters of Florida and as the conservation chair for the Sierra Adventure Coast Group. I am speaking for myself while being informed by their positions. I stand with those organizations, which are part of a coalition of 90 conservation organizations, civic groups, and businesses all across Florida that are opposed to the M-Course toll roads, as stated in their May 1st letter to Governor DeSantis urging him to veto SB 7068, the toll expressway bill. During this pandemic and public health emergency, it is not wise to proceed with this project as resources are being diverted to testing and healthcare, and exponential government debt is unsustainable. Funds may not be available for the project. The need for the project needs to be backed up by data, but everything will change with the pandemic. We face an uncertain future. The projected population growth of 1,000 people per day is an assumption. For Florida, that may not happen. The need for the project should be backed by statistical data documenting the need for these toll roads, not assumptions. The transportation sector of our economy is the #1 source of carbon pollution to our air. Paving over huge swaths of land destroys wildlife habitat and the trees that absorb carbon pollution and give us oxygen. Then, when you add more vehicle emissions, you add more carbon pollution. Asphalt holds heat. This combination of events adds to warming air and seas, which then expand and cause sea level rise and climate chaos. Florida is especially vulnerable with over 8,000 miles of coast. All of our outstanding Florida waterways are listed as impaired. We need a paradigm shift to more sustainable living, and a project of this magnitude puts us on an unsustainable road, literally. Thank you for putting the Springs priority focus areas on your maps. They need to be avoided and protected. Are all the wildlife corridors on your maps? Another person already asked that. Is all the information provided to this task force accessible to the public? Are aquifer recharge areas on your map? It would be wiser to study and evaluate our transportation needs and use those statistics to make conservative regional decisions based on need and careful planning, enhancing existing road infrastructure, conservation of natural resources and important recharge areas for the aquifer, protecting spring sheds and farmlands and our food supply. We need comprehensive planning using sustainability principles. We need transportation solutions for carbon-free living. Task force, please recommend that legislators and the governor rescind the vote that caused this project. The best decision at this time would be no bill. Thank you for allowing remote public participation, and please have this component as any part of any future meetings. And I notice a lot of people couldn't get online to comment. I don't know what the problem is there, but there's many that didn't get online to comment.
Thank you for your comment. Next up, Judy Altmans from Southwest Ranches, Florida. Up next is Paula Halupa from Fort Pierce, Florida. Paula, you are unmuted. However, it appears that you have not put in your PIN for audio. We have resent you a new PIN. We'll give you a minute. Paula Halupa from Fort Pierce, Florida. The pin has been resent to you. We'll circle back. Up next, Neil Fleckenstein from Tallahassee, Florida. Neil, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Neil Fleckenstein, Tall Timbers Research Station. Appreciate the opportunity to comment. I'd like to just reiterate the concerns that Tall Timbers has regarding the Suncoast connector, specifically in regard to Jefferson County, which is one of our focal areas. Jefferson County is just simply a natural resource treasure. The two outstanding Florida waters there, the Osceola and the Wassissa rivers, both outstanding Florida waters. When you added the spring priority focus area layer, which is a great layer to add, the vast majority of that watershed was included in that spring priority focus area. Tall Timbers and a number of local partners were recently awarded a major federal grant for conservation and land management in that watershed, and it's just a real treasure for the state. Jefferson County is also home to extensive private conservation lands. Tall Timbers alone has about 17,000 acres of conservation land and another 9,000 acres of fee simple land that we've protected there. And we have a number of other conservation partners who've done great work there as well. I'd say Jefferson County probably has the highest concentration of state listed historic sites in Florida, including one that is really considered one of the most important archaeological sites in the United States. So again, it's just an overall natural resource treasure. Now, we believe the existing US 1927 corridor, definitely within Jefferson County, but frankly, all the way down to Levy County, is significantly underutilized and certainly adequate for many years of growth. I think both the trip demand shows that, and basically anybody who's traveled on that road understands that as well. We also believe that large portions of the corridor are vulnerable to flooding and to sea level rise. And that's something that we really hope is taken into account before investing so much in this at-risk area. Because of these points, just to summarize, we oppose the construction of the Suncoast Connector Toll Road in Jefferson County. We think that again, it is such an important natural resource, an archaeological resource, that given the lack of travel demand on US 19, it's simply not warranted in Jefferson County. I'd also add that we agree with having to postpone the recent Monticello task force meeting, but we really hope that can be rescheduled in the future, as there are many, many people who wanted to attend and address their concerns about this road. So we truly hope that can be rescheduled once it's a safe environment to do so. Thanks to DOT and the task force. We appreciate their help and their work.
Up next is Amy Datz from Tallahassee, Florida. Amy, you are unmuted.
Hi. I would like to make a presentation on what I call E-Cubed. I think this project will address energy, environment, and the economy. How will it address energy? I believe that there will be solar power charging stations along the highway for electric cars. There's the potential for an electric rail, buses, and there's a potential that there would be a strip in the roadway where cars could charge and buses and trains could charge without having to stop. There will be a reduction of air pollution. I was the state transportation air quality program manager. It'll reduce congestion on 95 and 75. And there will be wildlife crossings. There's no need to think that the panthers will be killed by this. When I moved to Florida in '74, there were 20 panthers. Today, there's 220 panthers. The worst problem, or the worst thing to possibly harm or kill panthers, is agriculture. And I don't think anybody on this call is willing to give up food. Also, there will be stormwater reduction because of the way the engineering of it. And with more people, there will be septic tank reduction because there will be sewage treatment plants put in. This project will be good for the economy. It'll be good for everyone in Florida because today we waste $5 billion in congestion from trucks that have to deal with congestion. In the area where this will be, there is the largest amount of childhood poverty and unemployment. And it will provide the 700,000 Floridians with internet. Yes, you're right. Not everybody gets to say. I wonder how many of my MCOR opponents would be willing to, in solidarity with the people who are being positively or who are being impacted by this roadway, would be willing to give up their internet to show their solidarity with this group. I also want to just that there will be sea level rise, and the people of the 76% of the people in Florida who live on the coast will want to move north, and they will want to move inland. I think this is an important roadway. We should build it, and we have to look to the future. 95 and 19 will be underwater, and they will not be usable. We need this roadway. Please build it.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Anna Mavdorvia from Gainesville, Florida. Anna, you are unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can. Go ahead.
So my name is Anna Mavdorvia, and I'm a senior at Eastside High School in Gainesville, Florida. And I'm here to completely oppose the construction of the Suncoast connector. I've been on this webinar for over 3.5 hours because talking about this issue is very important to me. I am very angry with the Florida Department of Transportation, and I'm here to speak to you all on behalf of the environmentalist community and the younger generation. I have spent a lot of time on the Nature Coast. My father is a botanist and he studies wild irises, which is a beautiful flower that is found in that part of the state. Recently, he discovered a new species of iris that can be found in Dixie County and surrounding counties. A few weeks ago, he and I drove down to Dixie County to take pictures and collect samples of this newly discovered species, only to discover that there was construction being done on the road along which these flowers grow. The construction workers had uprooted and crushed the majority of the irises my father was hoping to research. It was truly devastating. And I was just thinking, if minor construction along a small road in the backwoods of Dixie County can involuntarily cause the destruction of a rare species, imagine what would happen if these giant toll roads are constructed. The Florida Nature Coast is unlike any other place in the world, and it must be protected. The amount of plants, animals, and other environmental treasures that would be unintentionally damaged or lost during this construction would be horrifying. So again, please don't build this road, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Makina Lang from Gainesville, Florida. Kina, you are unmuted.
All right. I'm with the Young Ladies Squad, Florida, and I'm really concerned about the financial reality of this project. The construction of these toll roads will cost billions of dollars over the course of a decade from public funds, and once completed, taxpayers are then expected to pay tolls on this private road to avoid the horrible traffic of interstate highways. And I remind you that we are currently in a global pandemic and looking down the barrel of the worst recession since the 1930s. We need to be redirecting our tax dollars towards what should be the state's #1 priority, which is public health. These needless toll roads are a fantastic waste of our limited money and resources. Please act in the interest of public health and protecting future generations from unnecessary financial hardship. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Elizabeth Walker from Gainesville, Florida. Elizabeth, you are unmuted. Elizabeth Walker, you are unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, we can. Go ahead.
So I'm just basically going to reflect what everyone else has said, that I believe a no-build option would be the only feasible option that makes sense for this toll road, especially now that coronavirus has wreaked havoc on our economy and more people are forced to apply for unemployment. This is a great opportunity to invest in clean public transportation. And in previous situations like this, like the Great Depression, investment in ambitious infrastructure is what led our country out of economic recessions and is a great opportunity for us to set a standard for other countries, and hopefully we could even invest in a future that rivals other countries and other in terms of technology and consciousness towards the environment. So I believe this is an opportunity that we shouldn't let pass us by. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Ann Johnson from Port St. Lucie, Florida. Ann, you are unmuted.
Hi, you can hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm fairly new to the state. I've been here for 3 years, but I do care deeply about the future of Florida. I don't live in the areas, being from Port St. Lucie, the areas where these roads will be built, but it will impact everybody in the state. We pay tax dollars, and I take advantage of all the outdoor activities that open areas offer to us here. I want to say that I thank you to the previous comments, listing the reasons why we should not be building these roads. And I won't go into that in any detail. I also believe no build is the only option. As a scuba diver, the water quality is most important to me, and I see the degradation of the oceans every time I am able to dive. To say we're going to avoid the springs, unfortunately, Florida is one big aquifer and is being depleted every day. The impact of pollution and runoff from vehicles, from more building, and congestion is only going to continue to degrade the springs and our aquifer. The financial impact, I feel, is not justified. This money would be better used to improve existing roads and infrastructure like septic systems, both public and private. I feel that the communities throughout Florida all need help with resiliency planning to cope with the climate change and the devastating results of that we're feeling already. So again, I would like to say that I believe that the no toll roads to ruin is the way to go, and would appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Now we are going to circle back through some of the names that weren't able to unmute. First up, Donna McCollum. Next will be Julie Conley and Eugene Kelly. First up, Donna McCollum. Donna, you are unmuted. You are self-muted if you unmute on your end. Donna McCollum, you're self-muted again. One last try, Donna McCollum. Moving on. Next up, Julie Conley. Julie Conley, you are unmuted. Julie Conley, you are unmuted. Last call for Julie Conley. Next up is Eugene Kelly. Next up, or next three, is Sarah Mapes, Daryl Barwich, and Mary Shabbat. Up first, Sarah Mapes. Sarah, you still haven't logged in with your PIN. We've sent you a new one. We'll give you just one moment. Next up is Daryl Barwich. Daryl Barwich, you are unmuted. Daryl Barwich, you are unmuted. Last call for Mr. Barwich. You are unmuted. Next up is Mary Shabbat. Next up is David Hastings. David Hastings, you are unmuted.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I assume that you can hear me. Is that a good assumption?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So I'm David Hastings. I'm from St. Petersburg. I'm a retired professor of marine science, and I'm an aquatic chemist. I'd like to address a couple of aspects of this proposal. But before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge and hope that everybody's safe, and I appreciate the opportunity to do a webinar. But this COVID-19 pandemic has clearly impacted all of our lives. And as such, I think the timing for this is highly flawed. We shouldn't be making these really important decisions during a pandemic. This is an important decision for numerous individuals, for counties, and for the entire state. And I think it's highly flawed that we're making this large decision now. I'd also like to point out that while this is not my expertise, it doesn't appear that DOT has identified a clear need for a road in this region. There's no clear reason to build the roads, and I think the burden of proof should be on the DOT to initiate this rather than have the process be different. But let me move on to talking about my experience in Florida. I moved here 20 years ago, and I discovered a wealth of unparalleled outdoor opportunities with these wonderful rivers, the fantastic clear spring runs, and the wonderful hikes. These outdoor opportunities kept me here in the Sunshine State rather than moving on. But these pristine areas are not just good for recreation, they're also essential to replenishing the water in the Florida aquifer. This water supplies our cities with clean drinking water, water to irrigate farms is necessary for agriculture. So while we don't realize it, these expanses of vast natural lands where the roads will be built actually protects Florida's water as rainwater percolates through the rock above the aquifer. And development of these lands to build the roads is, I think, going to significantly and substantially limit their ability to absorb rainwater. The development is really bad for the water supply, and we know that both the water supply and water quality are in crisis in this state. We should not destroy the waters that are so essential to the future of our entire state. Well, building these roads will not only impact our water supply and quality, it's simply a bad business decision. And as I started, there's no good data that establishes the needs for these roads. So while building new toll roads may appear to be a good solution to some perceived problems, this proposal was rushed through the Florida House with very little discussion or debate. And as such, I strongly oppose the building of these new roads. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Up next, Suzanne House. Suzanne House, you are unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm with Florida Voices for Animals, which is a nonprofit animal advocacy organization. And we are concerned about the decline of all wildlife and our environment, including the Florida panther, and how much more this toll road will add to their decline. The only ones profiting from this road are the legislators that own the land. We agree with the Sierra Club and we say no build.
Ms. House, are you finished? Or did we lose you? All right, Ms. House, thank you for your comment. Up next is Paula Halupa. Paula, you are unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, we can. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, hi. I live in Fort Pierce, Florida, and I'm a biologist who worked in conserve imperiled species my entire career. I moved to Florida more than 20 years ago because I wanted to, because I valued the natural areas and biological diversity. I wanted to enjoy and help protect species found nowhere else in the world. And as a biologist who cares deeply about the environment, and as a resident and taxpayer, I am deeply disturbed about the project for many reasons. I'll boil it down to three: process, purpose, and impacts. Process. How is it that so many Floridians oppose this project, yet so few know about these meetings? Where is a mechanism to inform the public and invite participation? Where are the public notices? It seems like there would be a broad, transparent, inclusive process to inform and include, especially when you're planning widespread, permanent, irreparable harm to the environment. I voiced concerns early on and asked to be given updates and notifications. I received none. Thank goodness for the CBD, Sierra Club, and others. I encourage the managers of this project to improve communication and be more mindful of the Sunshine Law if this moves forward. How did task force members get selected? If the goal is to find a project that is environmentally and financially feasible, then some major players have been left out. They should be included. Purpose. What is the true purpose of the project? The benefits listed on the website seem misguided, misleading, and disingenuous. Hurricane evacuation? Really? Emergency management planners typically advise people to shelter in place or use local shelters. I'll skip because I'm running out of time. But protection and enhancement of wildlife corridors or environmentally sensitive areas, that's admirable, but that's not what roads do. We should be real about what roads do. They cause development and sprawl. Finally, impacts to the environment. What will the projects do to the aquifers, the springs, wetlands, uplands, forests, natural areas, farmland? How much sprawl is anticipated? Surely FDOT and resource agencies estimate how much natural land is converted and developed with the building of each new road. Who will be looking at the environmental impacts? Are they qualified to do so? How will this project not appreciably reduce the likelihood of survival and recovery for the panther? What about the species on the Lake Wells Ridge? Really, changes in hydrology, effects of springs, animal movements? Let's get the experts involved. Where are the biologists, hydrologists, botanists, prescribed fire managers? Data layers are available at the natural resource agencies. This includes the Florida Wildlife Commission, FNA, FDACS, Fish and Wildlife Service. Really, the best option is no build. Let's be smart. The process is tainted, opaque.
Thank you for your comment. Time's up. At this point, This concludes our webinar. Thank you for attending.